Hey friends, Patrick God here, and I'm so proud to tell you that finally the Blazor WebAssembly e-commerce course is online after 1 year of hard work, not only regarding the course, but of course it was scripting, coding, editing the videos, creating the videos, and so on, uploading all that stuff, while also dealing with full-time work, a family, getting COVID, and well, moving 3 times in this last year. The course is now available. I'm so happy that I can tell you this finally. And if you want to skip that preview here now, just head down to the video description and make sure to use the link there, because then you get a discount. So if you think this course might be something for you, or if you just want to support me, thank you very much, then make sure to use the link in the video description to get the course. Enroll now, and then you've got lots and lots of hours of pure learning content. But the other option, of course, is just keep watching. First, I give you a quick overview of the complete course, so just keep watching and then you will know what you can expect of this course and what you're going to learn in there. And after that, you see the title and the time codes. You will already see a lot of this course in this preview, so I hope all that resonates with you. Again, thank you so much for staying with me, because really you guys and the whole community motivated me to just keep up the work and do that stuff and finally finish the complete course. Okay, I think there's not much to say. Of course, like and subscribe if you want to, but now it's about the course, so enjoy the preview. As the name of this online course implies, we are going to build an e-commerce web application with .NET and Blazor WebAssembly. We'll cover the complete stack, meaning Blazor for the client, a web API for the backend web service, and Entity Framework Core with SQL Server Express for the database. We'll start with a walking skeleton. This means right at the beginning of this course and in just a few hours, you learn how to build a running full stack web application with all the mentioned frameworks and technologies. So after this section, you won't use any mock data, for instance. You will already make calls to the web service, grab data from the SQL Server, and return the results back to the Blazor WebAssembly client. On top of that, we will introduce best practices to that walking skeleton. For instance, we don't want to use fat controllers. Instead, we'll use the repository pattern together with dependency injection. After that, we build a huge part of the e-commerce application. In this section, it's all about the products your user can buy in your shop. It's about categories, product variants, a search bar, pagination, a basic cart, and much more. With all these implementations, you learn lots of features of Blazor WebAssembly together with the web API, and also relationships between entities and how to manage them with Entity Framework Core and SQL Server. After that, we dive into authentication with JSON Web Tokens. You will learn how to register users, log them in, and create JSON Web Tokens to authenticate your users, set the token in the default HTTP request header, utilize the famous authorize attribute to secure your web API, and add a page for the user's profile so that they can change their password, for instance. The next section is all about the cart and orders. Until this point, you've already implemented a cart, but it only works offline. So now it's time to store the products of the cart in the database and also implement the final order and an overview of the order history. But one thing will still be missing, and that's an option to check out and pay for your order. We cover that with the next section and use Stripe to do that. This means your users can pay with credit card, Google Pay, and Apple Pay. Additionally, we'll continue with the smaller section where we implement the option to add a delivery address. And after that, it's time for the big administration dashboard. Everything you've learned so far comes together in this section. We utilize lots of features of Blazor WebAssembly. We build several CRUD operations for our entities, meaning an administrator should be able to create, read, update, and delete all products, categories, and product variants. And to know if the user is allowed to do all that, we introduce role-based authorization. Okay, so far the overview, and now let's start with something simple. Let's install the .NET Framework and Visual Studio next, and then we start with the e-commerce project. All right, now the very first thing we have to do is, before we can start building our Blazor WebAssembly e-commerce application, of course, downloading the .NET framework and also Visual Studio. Now, what I did is simply, you can see it already, of course, I Googled for .NET download, and as you can see, the first hit is already the correct one. So simply go there. And by the time of recording this course, the latest version is or was .NET 6.0. So please just click this button here, download .NET SDK. The SDK, of course, is very important, not only the runtime, the SDK, but I'm sure you already know all this. Probably for a 64-bit operating system like Windows 10 or 11, for instance. So again, please download this one, install it, and then you're good to go. And after that, let me cancel this here. We need Visual Studio. Again, the latest version now is Visual Studio 2022. I Googled for Visual Studio 2022 download. Here we come to the dev blog of Visual Studio. Nice little post by Amanda. And here we see the button for the download of Visual Studio 2022. So please go there. And then from all these versions, we are going to use the Community Edition. This is the released one. It's not a preview, the Community Edition, final version. And with that, we can do everything we want to do. So please feel free to download the Community Edition here of Visual Studio 2022. And when you're done with that, one more hint, again, you probably already know that, but if you want to build Blazor applications, you have to select a certain package. In my case, here's the Visual Studio installer now. You can see I've got a few versions installed already. But here, version 17 of 2022, I have to click Modify. In your case, there's something else here, a button to probably install Visual Studio. Long story short, you have to select this box here, ASP.NET, ASP.NET and Web Development, and only then you will install everything you need to build Blazor WebAssembly applications. Okay, and that's that. So please do that. I'll wait here, and when you downloaded and installed everything, please move on with the next lecture. Welcome to the foundations, the walking skeleton section. In this section, we will create our Blazor WebAssembly ASP.NET Core hosted project. This means we will have a Blazor WebAssembly client project, we will have a server project for the web API, and we will also have a shared project for all our models. Throughout the upcoming lectures, we will install Entity Framework Core, SQL Server Express, and if you want, the SQL Server Management Studio to manage your database. Everything is available for free, so please don't worry about that. After this section, you already know how to build a complete full-stack Blazor WebAssembly application. You'll be able to make a call from your Blazor client to the web API, grab data from the SQL Server database, and display the data on the client. Are you ready? Let's start. All right, everything is downloaded and installed, so please start Visual Studio 2022 and then let's create our new project. Simply click this button here, and here already you can see it in the recent project templates. I'm using Blazor WebAssembly apps quite often, and in your case, please also select Blazor WebAssembly app. If you don't find it here directly, of course, you can search for it, just enter Blazor and there it is. Important is that we are not going to build a Blazor server app, we are going to build a Blazor WebAssembly application, the typical SPA or single page application architecture where the client downloads the application and it is not only rendered on the server. So this is in essence the big difference between those two. So again, Blazor WebAssembly app, and this is what we want to do. Okay, and then of course we give this thing a name, for instance Blazor e-commerce, choose a location, that's fine, click next, and now the new beautiful .NET 6 framework is here. Of course we could also use .NET Core 3.1, 5, 6, whatever you've got installed. but please use .NET 6.0 if you want to follow this course right now. Regarding authentication, we won't use anything here in the dropdown. We will build our own authentication, meaning we will create JSON web tokens. We will register users, we will log in users, we will again return JSON web tokens and authenticate users with these tokens and also authorize them, of course. Meaning if you want to know if a user is an administrator or not, we will store the roles or claims in this token, but this is for another section, of course. Configure for HTTPS is just fine. And then very important, please select ASP.NET Core hosted. What this thing is, of course, you can read it here. Specified includes an ASP.NET Core host for the Blazor WebAssembly app. I don't know if this tooltip is really helpful. It simply means we get 3 projects, and under these 3 projects is also a server project, and this in essence is a web API, and we want to do that, of course. So we've got the full stack here. We've got our Blazor WebAssembly client, the web API server project, and also a shared project for the models, but you will see that in a minute. So please hit create. And then Visual Studio and the .NET 6 framework is doing its magic. And we have our solution here. All right, nice. Please don't be confused by the big font. I zoomed in here. My display in this case is zoomed to 150%. Just did this, so I hope that you can read everything more easily. So when I go to the code, for instance, here's the weather forecast a model. You can see the font is actually 110%, but the whole display here, the whole screen is zoomed in to 150%. So that's why the font is a bit bigger. Hope you like this. In this case, also the Solution Explorer is bigger and everything else. All right, but anyways, let's close everything. And then let's give you a really short overview of the Solution Explorer here. Now in the solution here, we've got again 3 projects. We've got the Blazor e-commerce client project. We've got the Blazor e-commerce server project, which is also the start project in this case, and the Blazor e-commerce shared project. Now the shared project is, well, the simplest one, I would say. Here we will add all our models, and as you can see here in the default project or in the default application, we've got this model, the weather forecast. That's because we've also got a controller that is using this class, and of course also a page here, the fetch data page in essence of the Blazor e-commerce application that is also using the weather forecast model. So here we will add the models, and the fantastic thing here is that we can use the models both in the server as well as in the client project. If you build applications with other SPA frameworks like Angular and React, also great frameworks, also Vue of course, and all the others, really like them, but it could be the case maybe in your situation that you would have to create models for the server and for the client, but this is not the case here. We can access every model in both projects. I really love this, and we will do this a lot, of course. So this is the shared project. Then let's go to the server first. Again, this is simply a web API, and since this online course is not for the absolute beginner, although I think if you are a beginner to a Blazor WebAssembly, I think you will be able to follow along really nice. But anyways, I won't go over every single file. The most important thing here is the program CS in the beginning, I'd say. As you can see here now with .NET 6, we've got, or this thing looks a little bit different than in the older .NET framework versions. We've got the minimal API approach here, I'd say, where we don't see a namespace and the class and so on. Earlier, or in .NET 5, we've also got a startup CS. This is gone. We've only got the program CS, and here you can see we've got the services that are registered. The web application is built, and we use some middleware, and in the end we run the app. Won't go deep here for now, but just so you know, this is the start class, the starting file of the server project, and here we will also add our own services later and other middleware for the authentication, for instance. Additionally, we've got a settings file. We will use this later for our connection string, for instance, and also for the JSON Web Token. And here now, already very interesting, the controller folder. We will add several controllers. And in here, this controller is creating mock weather forecast data with already one method here that will, well, return 5 random weather forecasts. Okay, and that's already the server project. So let's go to the client here. As you can see, we've also got a program CS, really short, in this file. And here, well, you can see it. The application starts. We've got an app eraser file. We've got an imports file. Now this is interesting here. We can add global usings to the imports file. And with .NET 6, we can also do that in our server project. We will do this in a couple of minutes. Anyways, and then interesting is this thing here. We've got several components and we will build our first component soon so that you know what this thing actually is. But in essence, this counter thing here is a page. It's a component, but also a page that you can access. You see the page directive here. And we've got HTML here and also C# already. So we will use all this later again. And we've got the main layout, which is a shared component in this case. The main layout then uses the NavMenu, which is also a shared component. So you see already, maybe you get the idea how these components interact, how these things work. And additionally, we've got the default HTML folder, I'd say the www root folder with the index.html, which is the start of this or the base file of this web application. Then you see this loading string here, for instance, and you will see this when we start the app as well. We've got a fav icon and we also got CSS, the global style sheet here. Bootstrap is already included in this default Blazor WebAssembly template and also open iconic for several icons. Okay, and I think this should be it for a short overview of the solution. And now I'd say we already start the app, but there are 2 ways to start it. Actually, there are 3 or even more ways to start it. The very first thing I want to show you next is how to start this application in the debugging mode, and then we will also have a quick look at how to debug this app. All right, now as I already said, the starting project here, the start project is the Blazor e-commerce server project. We've got 2 run buttons here. This thing will start the application with debugging features and this thing without. I can already say that throughout this course, we will rather use this little button here. It's just faster. But just to show you how debugging works, maybe you have to do it. Who knows? Maybe I have to do it. Let's see. Let's click this button here and you can already see the diagnostic tools are here, the call stack, the watchers, and so on. And here on the other screen now is the actual application. So this is the default Blazor WebAssembly app. We've got the nav menu here. We've got a home page. We've got the counter page and the fetch data page, which is loading some data. Now here in the counter page, you can see this button, click me, and we can click it and then it increases the counter, and fetch data is the page that is actually doing the get call, the web API call. We can already see it here in the, or also see it here in the network tab. Let's filter it by fetch XHR, which stands for XML HTTP requests. I opened the console with F12, but what you can also do is, of course, go to more tools and then the developer tools here. And now let's just go back to the counter and then the fetch data. And here you see the call already. Please bear with me if this is a bit overwhelming, a bit too fast, too much right at the beginning. We will go through this step by step, of course, but just so you know how this application works in general, I just want to show you this here already. So you see the call, and this is important. We see a real web API call already. We got no mock data here in the client. This is a web service call. The only thing left, I would say, is that we access data from a database. We will do this in the next section, the full stack foundation. There we will build a walking skeleton, a so-called walking skeleton, meaning that we have the Blazor WebAssembly client, the web API web service, and also a SQL Server database where we get then data from. But here you can see the data, and this is exactly that, what you also see on this page. Now, the great thing really is when we start this application in debugging mode, we can debug the client and the server at the same time. So let's go back to Visual Studio. And for instance, we've got the counter page here, and here is the method that increments the count. You can already see some data binding here. For instance, here, this is a paragraph, a simple HTML paragraph that binds the current count. And here now in the code block, you see this this variable as well, current count. So this is what is displayed. And now here, this button binds the function increment count on the event on click. And this thing is simply, again, increasing the count. So very simple stuff. Let's debug this. So we add a breakpoint here, go back to the page, go to our counter page, and then hit click me. And there we are. The breakpoint was hit, and we can debug this thing now. Really great stuff. Let's continue and remove this breakpoint now. And now again, the same application. I did not restart anything. Let's go to the weather forecast controller here. And here's this get method. Looks a bit strange maybe if you see this for the very first time. So what this thing does is simply returning random weather forecasts. As you can see here, temperature is random, the summary is random. Only the date is correct, I'd say, for the next 5 days. So we've got the hit point, the breakpoint here, and when I now go to the page fetch data, it already makes the call, and you see how fast this is. This is really interesting for me as well, because .NET 6 and Visual Studio 2022 is very, very new. So this is really exciting. Okay, breakpoint is hit. We can debug. We can step in, through, over, whatever. Continue this. And that's it. This is really everything I wanted to show you. Continue again. And here we are back at the page. So this is how debugging works. And let's do one more thing already, which is trusting the dev certificate. Now, what is this? Well, you can see here, in my case, it already works. Connection secure. So this means when you can remember that by creating this application, we configured this for HTTPS. Now, when you're doing this for the very first time, maybe you already got the pop-up in Visual Studio that it wants to trust a certificate, because usually you do not have a certificate, or it's not trusted when you create a new application or a new website. You first have to create a new, or get a new certificate for this application. But what we can do here locally, when we develop this, we can trust the dev certificate, and this is what I want to do next. All right, now I stopped the application with this stop icon there. And now again, to trust the dev certificate, we go to the CLI. So let me open this new window here. And what we can do now is we can use the .NET command, as you can see here. And with the .NET command, there's also something like .NET dev certs HTTPS. And let's have a look at the available commands here. As you can see, there are some, but what we want to do, again, if you did not already get the pop-up from Visual Studio, we want to use this command here, trust the certificate on the current platform, and so on. So again, let's just enter this thing here with HTTPS and then -- trust was requested, current blah, blah, blah. A valid HTTPS certificate is already present. So this is happening in my case, but in your case, now you should trust the certificate. And the great thing is now that when you open the application in Chrome or any other browser, you shouldn't get the warning that this connection is not secure. Okay, so with that out of the way, we're ready for everything you want to implement. In particular, later, the Stripe checkout. There we really need the certificate because otherwise we cannot work with the webhooks when we use Stripe checkout. But again, this is for another section. The very next thing I want to show you is a really great feature that we get with .NET 6 and Visual Studio 2022, and this is the hot reload. Now, hot reload, what is this? If you do not know this already, before, when you started the application with this button here, you run it, you can debug it, but when you make any change, you would have to restart the complete application to see the change. Now, with .NET Core 3.1 and .NET 5, there was a little trick, I would say, or just another way to start the application in essence. And what we did is we opened the package manager console and started the application from the CLI. We can still do that. For that, we have to go to the server directory. So change directory, Blazor e-commerce, and then server, because this is the starting application. And then we can, for run, enter .NET run, but then again, we would have to stop and start the application when we want to see our changes. But there's also another command, which would be .NET watch run. And with that, you can see it here, hot reload is enabled. And then Chrome starts on my other screen. Here it is. And now as soon as I change something, let's do that. We go to the counter page, and then let's go back here. And now I say, for instance, click me now. I save this. You can see the watcher recognized a file change, hot reload of changes succeeded. And when we go to Chrome, we already see the change here. You did not have to stop and start the application. But now Microsoft and the .NET team changed something, and this change is huge. We do not have to do this here. We do not have to use the CLI. We can now use hot reload from Visual Studio 2022 or within Visual Studio itself. Isn't that great? So let's stop the app here and maybe also close this. And now hot reload should work also with debugging, but in my case, I tested it a little, was a little buggy still. But when we really use start without debugging, let's do that now. You see, we do not get the diagnostic tools. Nothing changes here in the IDE. But what we get is the application again, of course, and we got hot reload. Now, the thing is, you've seen it a couple of seconds ago. I just saved the file and the hot reload was already doing its magic. Here, you first have to activate it. So you can unselect this. By default, it is not selected, hot reload on file save. You would have to manually click hot reload, but I think it makes a lot of sense to just select this thing here, hot reload on save. And now let's just remove this again. Like that, save it. Let's go back, and we already see it. It was really fast. Maybe you've seen the check mark here, this icon here that, well, showed us that the hot reload was doing its magic. Maybe we can try this again one more time. Click me, exclamation mark, we save, go back, yeah, there it is, and we already see the change, and this works for other files as well. So it's not the Razor file here, it's not the HTML, it's also the C# code, it's also the the web API here, the server project. So when we make any change here, it also works, and it is hot reloading. The only thing that is not working, but this was already the same with the .NET watch run command, is when we add new models, for instance, add new functions. In this case, we have to restart the application, but it's not stopping and starting the debugging process. It's really, really fast. How this thing works, as you can see here in the background, it's in essence the same command. It's the typical, it's the watcher in essence. You see the same log here. You can just rewind the video a little bit, and then you can see in the, oh no, here it's still here, of course. So you see in the package manager console, this is in essence the same stuff, even the port was the same. So yeah, this works quite good, I think. And maybe just to show you one more thing, let's change that back. It is reloading in the background. I know this. As I said, it already works for other files such as style sheets, CSS. This thing here is called CSS Isolation. We will do that in a couple of lectures as well. For instance, if I want to change the background color, and this was well, not sometimes. In my experience, it was really often that this did not really work with .NET Watch Run. You changed the CSS file and it simply did not recognize the change. But here now, it's this background here, this gray, top row. When I change this color now to, I don't know, blue, and save it, there it is. There was the change. Really, really fast. So I just love this thing, and I am really, really excited about all our experiences we do together in this course with the new hot reload feature, where we really do not use the CLI anymore. Well, for the migrations, we will use it with Entity Framework, but not for running the application. We will really use the buttons now here in Visual Studio. So really exciting, I think. But now with that out of the way, let's continue or start with actually building our e-commerce application. And in the next lecture, what we want to do is we create our very first model, which is the product model. Okay, so the application is still running, and let me close all this. Don't need it now. So now we've got an empty space here, got some room. We want to create the product model now. And just to tell you already, the first product model we will create here is not the final thing, of course. We will add some properties, we will make some changes, we will refactor stuff. I'm telling you this just because I got some feedback from students, not many students, but they did not like the approach that we have to refactor some things sometime. I do this, I still do this. I worked on it and I hope I improved it a little bit, but I still do it that way because I think this is the best way to learn. If I would give you the complete product model for now, I think this is too much, simply too much, too overwhelming, way too complicated to explain all the connections, all the relationships to all the other stuff that is coming. So please bear with me. I hope you like this. I would love to get your feedback about this. So what we do is we right click the shared project and we add a new class here. And this class is called products, and just click add. All right, and what you can see here now is already the new thing. These violet or purple squiggly lines say, you see it here, adding namespace requires restarting the application, adding class requires restarting application. So I think we will see that a lot when we add new code. Another thing is here, I don't want this to be an internal class, I want this to be a public class. And then let's add some properties here. So the very first thing is I use the built-in snippet prop. So just enter prop and then hit tab twice. And here we add an ID. So a product gets an ID. Also a string, which is a title. Another thing that is new. This is amazing. This is IntelliCode. It's not called IntelliSense anymore. It's now IntelliCode, so an AI improved IntelliSense in essence. And what this thing does is it suggests some code, and this actually was really great, because when I would not add the default value here, or the initial value string empty, then in another situation in our code, we would run probably into a null reference exception. So this is a nice little suggestion. Thank you very much for telling me that. And this is also crazy that it already suggests the description. I tested this earlier, of course, and it really learned what I want, or what I did, and what I probably want to do here. So yeah, I just hit tab, and this is the very next thing. Description, and what's this? Yeah, non-nullable property. So again, this is new, and what we can do here now, again, set this to empty by default. Great stuff. And with Alt, Shift, and F, I formatted this thing. Okay, so the product gets also a description. The next thing I want to add is an image URL. And again, we get this suggestion here. Great stuff. Oh, but it changed that to my property. So now I want to use an image URL. And then already the last thing, which is a decimal now. And this thing is the price. Okay. What happened now? I hit Control S to save the product model now in this project. And this is again new. It says that hot reload cannot automatically apply your changes. What we can do now is continue editing, but then we would not see the change. Well, it's a new model, so nothing changes actually in the client. But still, what we can do is we select this box now to always rebuild when updates cannot be automatically applied. And this checkbox, as you can see here, will be reset when the solution is closed. I think in the settings we can change that as well. So let's simply do that and rebuild, apply the changes. And now let's go here. Yeah, you see that was everything. This was the rebuilding of the application. And this is actually what the .NET watch run command did earlier with .NET 5, for instance. So it was not really a hot reload where it simply changed a little bits of your application. It always rebuilt your app, but it was very fast, similar to this thing here. Yeah, you see lots of new stuff, and that's why I'm talking maybe a bit too much. Again, feedback. We can also always update the lectures if you think this is just too much talk. But this is the product model now. So we've got our product model. One more thing I already want to do is I want to add this model now in the imports razor here, because then when we create our first component in the next lecture, we don't have to add the using there. So simply enter add using Blazor e-commerce shared. That's it. That's everything we have to do. And now I would say let's try this already. In our program CS, we will create, in a couple of minutes, we will create a new controller that is using the product model. And now we can also use a global using. So global using has to be in front, or you have to type this before the not global usings. So for instance, if I do this here, just to show you this, global using, and that already tells us a global using directive must precede all non-global using directives. So let's move that back. Global using, and then also Blazor e-commerce shared, like that. And with that, we do not have to again add the using for the product later when we add the product controller here. And actually, this is what I was waiting for. We can also remove this thing now, because now also the weather forecast model is available here in the controller without adding the using. So we can either use the light bulb to say remove unnecessary usings here, or we click this little thing, run code cleanup, and this is doing exactly the same thing. So let's save this now. Got our product model. We've got the global using here in the server project, and in essence also the global using in our imports file. Okay, great. That's that. And now let's create your first component. So your first component, we do that in the client project, and the very first thing I want to create is a product list, and this product list should be a component that is actually shared. It's not a page. I want to create a shared product component here and show this product list then in the index razor here, so on the start page, similar as you can see here to the survey prompt. This is also a shared component, and you can find it here. So everything you see on the page, let's have a quick look again. This thing here, this is our index razor component. So this page actually with this little page directive, the route is simply the /, and you can see the hello world and welcome to your new app. Great stuff. And then you see this little box here, but this is actually another component. So again, the survey prompt component. And with this thing here, it already communicates. So the index razor component already communicates with the survey prompt by giving the survey prompt a title. So this is one way of communication between components. How can a parent component communicate with a child component? Then there's also a way back, of course, child with parent, and then another way where any component can, in essence, communicate with any other component, and this is done with events. We'll do that later. But something similar will be done now with the product list. Again, the survey prompt gets this title parameter here, and we will now create our product list. So please right-click the shared folder, select add, and then razor component. Again, this is our product list component. There it is. Now, as already mentioned, we've got HTML code here and also C# code. If you don't like this approach, meaning that you have the C# code or the code block in the same file as the HTML, you can create a code behind file. It's absolutely no problem. What you have to do then is right-click the shared folder again, click add, and then a new class. And this thing, this is a convention, has to be called ProductList razor and then CS. And as you can see now, it is below the ProductList razor file. You can collapse this and expand this again. And now you can add your C# code here and not here in the code block. So this is totally up to you, but I'm a guy who likes this approach here. So I remove this file again. This works for me. So we've got our product list. And what I want to do now is I want to create mock products. So let's create 3 products that we will then display in the component. And for that, I prepared some products on Wikipedia. Let me do this manually now for this time only. If you want, you can of course go to the GitHub repository and simply copy and paste the products from there. But let's do this manually only for now. And after that, we also kind of copy and paste the stuff and change it where it is necessary. So first, let's create a new private static field, which are our products, a list of products. We call this products, and this is already a new list of products here. And we will add 3 products. The first one has the ID. I love that it is formatting automatically. That's nice. Now ID is 1. And now regarding the title, Let me just add empty strings here, and then we will paste the stuff from Wikipedia. So title, description, image, URL is also empty here, and then the price, let's set this to $9.99. And also let's copy this. So we really have 3 products. Change the ID maybe also the price, so there's a little bit of variation. Okay, now the title. The first thing I opened here is the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So let's copy this and paste it here. And regarding the description, let's just use the first paragraph here. All right. Image URL now is this thing. And we're done with this book. Now the next one I would like to use is Ready Player 1, not the image, the actual article here. So Ready Player 1, also of course a great book. Then the first paragraph here, please. All right, and now the image. Okay, and then the last one is 1984. So this is the title. We've got a description and also again an image. All right. Okay, so we've got our mock products and now we write some HTML. And what I want to do is simply show an unordered list with some style sheet stuff, not much, I promise. And already the great thing here is that we can use C# code, not only in the code block, but also inside the HTML, so inline C#. So let's just do this. We don't need the title here. Let's add our unordered list with the class list unstyled, so we get no bullet points or something. Some classes, of course, are already provided by Bootstrap, and some we have to create ourselves. Now I did this, or we will do this, because I think this is also a good way to learn to do all this manually. And please, again, bear with me. I'm not a designer, of course, so it's not the very best design in the whole universe. There are frameworks like Blazor or Blazorize. If you want me to use them and show you how to create an application, maybe even this e-commerce application here with a new section with these frameworks then, or these libraries, then tell me this. Please write that in the comments or the Q&A section. But anyways, let's use our custom CSS now. And here already what we can do is we use a for each with the add character here. So for each. And normally I'm able to click or hit tab. Okay, let's try that again. Let's choose this one. All right. So we've got a for each, and now we say for every product in our products collection now from the code block. And in here now, we can say we've got a list item with the class media, not really media, a custom class we will add, and my3, this is the margin on the y-axis, that's the correct term. Then we add a div for our image with the class media image wrapper and a right margin of 2. These are Bootstrap classes again. We will add a link here, but for now, let's just use the hashtag here, or the hash character. And after that, we add the actual image with the class media image, and now the source. And this is also amazing. With the add, we say this is C# code, so we access our product, and then we see it here already, the image URL. And of course, we can also give this thing a text with alt add product title. Okay, so this is our image. And next we add a body with a new div. Class is media body here. Again, let's add a link like that. And later, of course, we will add a link here to the details of this product. And then we add the title with h4. The class we can add here is margin bottom 0, and then we add the product title. And after that, we add a paragraph after the link. Paragraph where we add the description. Like that. And then the price with the class price. And here this is displayed as $, and then the product price. All right. So we save everything, and now we go to our index razor, and actually let's remove everything now, almost everything, and we add the product list like that. And what we can do here, this is also new with .NET 6, the page title component sets the title of the header of the page. And what we can do here maybe already is setting this to my shop, because this is the very creative name of our e-commerce application. All right, so short recap first. We created our shared component product list. We added some mock products here in the code block. So we've got the list of products, and then we added some HTML already with a for each loop where we access some properties of these products. And then in the index razor, the very first page we access here, we added the product list component. And when everything worked as expected, we should already see our products. So let's go back to our application, and there they are. Well, does this look nice? So we really see the title, My Shop, and we also see our products here, our books. But of course, this does not work because, oh, that's nice. That's also new, that we've got this scrolling effect. Of course, this doesn't look very nice. We have to add some CSS, and we do that next. Now, to add the cascading style sheets, we have several options again. We've got this app CSS file, the global style sheets, in the www root folder, but we don't want to use this every time or for every component. What we want to do is we use CSS Isolation, and you can already see that here in the main layout razor. We've got the main layout razor CSS file, and also here in the NavMenu, for instance. And we do the same now for our product list. Similar to the code behind file, we create a new file here. So add new item. And this is a CSS file. So we look for a style sheet, and now we call this product list razor CSS, And again, you see it's now below our component, and now we can add our CSS. And I know that this is tedious at times, but let's do this just for learning purposes. So the first class here I would want to add is the media image. We give this thing a maximum height of 200 pixels. We give it also a maximum width of 200 pixels. Then we set the border radius to 6 pixels. Also, what I want to do is set the margin bottom to 10 and a transition transform for 2.2 seconds. That's what I wanted to say. Now regarding the media image wrapper, we say the width is 200 pixels and the text align is center. Then we've got the media image hover, and actually let's move that up here like that. Okay, and this now gets a transform with a scale, so we zoom in a little bit or scale it a little bit, make it bigger. All right, and then we've got the price, which simply gets the color green. Okay, with that I thought we should also already see a change, but we don't. That's interesting. Anyways, we have to add a little more CSS for the responsiveness. So add media, and now for a maximum width of 1023.98 pixels, so almost 1024, we say media flex direction is a column, and then the media image wrapper gets a width of 100% and a height auto. Okay, so that's our CSS. And again, let's have a look. What happens if we reload the application, or if we open the console and then say empty cache and hard reload? Nope. That's interesting. Hard reload button doesn't work either. And what about restarting the application? Now it's done. Okay. Well, I don't know if this is really disappointing, but well, in this case, maybe because this is a new CSS file, we really have to restart the app manually, but you can see it's really fast still. So I think that's still okay. And I just want to see what happens now. If, for instance, you set this to 2 and save this. Yeah, okay. So this is then really fast. If the file is there, it works. But if not, we have to restart the application. Browser refresh with an error. Interesting, interesting. As I said, very, very new, all this .NET 6 and Visual Studio 2022. But we already achieved, I would say, a big milestone, because we now see a shared component here with CSS isolation. We also changed the styling for another view, as you can see here already. When I make this a bit bigger, not really able to do this. So when I close, oh yeah, okay. So when I close the console, or I really make this big, then we see the image here. But if I make this a bit smaller, then we got the column here, the column design. All right, so this works. And next we are creating our first web API controller. So we're moving from the client to the server project. Okay, sorry for this. I continued with the recordings of this course, but now I realized I made a little mistake regarding the CSS. As you can see here, I actually wanted this div to be next to the image, and for that I, well, wanted to use a class that was available in Bootstrap version 4, but with .NET 6 now, we got Bootstrap 5, and this class is gone. And the class I mean is, you see it here, we already got the product details, so I continued with the course, but let me make this change now and push this lecture between the others. It's not much, but it's a little fix still that makes the design a little bit better, I think. And now here in the ProductList Razor, you can see this thing here, media body and media are actually classes that were available in Bootstrap 4. Now let's add them real quick, and then we're good to go and we can continue with the application. So first, the media class is simply display flex, and then align items flex start. And now media body, and this thing here now it gets flex 1. And now let's have another look. Yeah, it already reloaded. This is the great thing of the new hot reload. Now it looks better, and in the case we have less space, then we see it as a column. Okay, this is everything I wanted to show you, and now let's continue. Now your first controller, of course, will be created in the server project, and here you see it already, and you have seen it already as well. This is the controllers folder here, and here we already got the weather forecast controller. This is a web API controller, and now let's create our very first own controller by right-clicking this folder and then add, and then not a new item this time, we choose controller. And now here we see a bunch of options, but these are the wrong ones. We are not building an MVC application, so we do not want to create an MVC controller. Instead, we go to API. We want to build an API controller. And now we've got another 3 options here, or other 3 options here. You see an empty API controller, an API controller with read and write actions. You can see it here, REST actions to create, read, update, delete, and a list entities. So all the CRUD operations already are prepared here. And there's even more generated code for us. If we want, we can create an API controller with actions using Entity Framework. So actually using Entity Framework to do all the CRUD operations. Now, in my opinion, first, for learning purposes, and second, also when you already know what you're doing, I think an empty controller is the best choice, but that's just my opinion. At least for learning purposes, I think this is a really, really great thing. So please, let's create an empty API controller, and then we will create our methods by ourselves. So all the CRUD operations. So we just click add, and then we call this thing, since we want to create something to get our products, the product controller, and click add. Okay, there it is already. We have a little bit of generated code. First, the base class here, which is an MVC controller without view support. If we wanted view support, we would inherit from the controller class. Let's have a quick look. Maybe just click control and then click on the class here. You can see there's already a bunch of stuff available that we will use. Well, parts of that we will use, for instance, the DbContext, claims principle. The user here is very important later for authentication. Then methods for the results we want to return, like the OK method here, and so on. So lots of stuff. we will use here. And apart from that, we see these two attributes here, the route and the API controller attribute. And as you can see here, when I hover over API controller, this thing indicates that a type and all derived types are used to serve HTTP API responses. So actually exactly what we want here. And the routes, well, maybe the name already implies what it is. It specifies an attribute route on a controller. So this is then the actual URI, the link or the URL, you name it, for accessing the controller. And this is the string API, then /, and then in brackets controller, which means the name of the controller. And this is this string here, this term before the controller term, so simply product. So API controller, this is how we access our product controller. Just to compare it really quick with the weather forecast controller, we do not see the API string here. Again, that's totally up to you. Some APIs use the API string, some don't. I like to use the default string here, so API first and then the / and then the controller name, and then later when we use different methods, we add something else to access the specific method. So what we want to do here in this controller is returning our products, our mock products. And when we go back to our product list component real quick, then what we can do is we can actually grab them and paste them to the controller, because now we want to get them from here, right? So we have our product list now here. Let's format this if it wants to, but it doesn't. All right. And now again, just to mention, this class now already knows the product type Blazor e-commerce shared when we is the namespace. And when we remove this here, let me just cut this real quick. Then the type is not known, and we could add the using directive in here. But let's keep it like that. I really like that. And when .NET 6 is, or C#10 is providing this feature, why not use it, right? So we got our products list. And with that, the next thing we can already do is create the method, which is a get method. And really quick, the HTTP request method we are going to use in this course are get, post, put, and delete. Now to receive or read data, we will use get, and this is where we really just receive data. We do not send anything to the web service. Well, maybe a query string, meaning something in the URL, but we do not have a body, a request body that we send to the server here. So this is the get request method. And again, here in the weather forecast controller, we also see this thing. This is the attribute. We need to create a get method. It is not really necessary if you call your method something like get weather forecasts, get products, and so on. This is a convention where the web API then knows that this is get method and that an HTTP get request method is used here, so you don't have to do it. But as we will see in the next lectures, we will add the SwaggerUI, so an API documentation that is generated, and this thing really needs this attribute, otherwise it does not know what request method is used here. So we've got get. Then we've got post, put, and delete, and post will be used to create stuff. Put is used to update stuff. In both these cases, we will have a request body that we will send to the server. And then the last thing is the delete method. And well, the name already says it all. It's there to remove stuff. But we want to create a get method. So let's add our attribute already, HTTP get. There you see it here. We've got get, we've got delete, we've got more stuff, of course, but post, put, get, and delete is everything we're going to use in this case. If you want me to implement something else, again, please tell me. I'm open for your feedback. But now the get method, and then we say public async. And you see now the suggestion here, which is really interesting because this is totally sufficient. We can say it returns a task with an I action result. And I would say we do it like that. And we call this thing get products. And now this is really simple. It returns OK, and then our products. All right, now why do I say this is interesting? This is the return type here. It defines a contract that represents the result of an action method. Another way to do this is not using the interface of the action results here, but actually using the class with the type that is returned. And we will again need this actually for the SwaggerUI, but let's try it that way now, and then we will change it later. And the other thing here, which is important again, is the OK function here. This creates an OK object, result object that produces in status code 200 OK and 200 OK. You maybe already know this. Just means, well, everything is okay. Everything went just fine. We've got no error. This is the data. Here you are. Perfect. Move on. Other cases would be something like a bad request, for instance. When we hover over this, it says 400 bad requests. Something is wrong here. Or we've got something that knows everyone, even people who do not code, maybe 404 not found, and so on. But everything is okay here with the products call, so let's just save it. This line here tells us that we're not using something asynchronous, but we will later when we use Entity Framework. So this is our method already, and we can already test this, of course. So let's save this. I have to start the application again because I'm recording this part now on another day. So build succeeded. We've got our hot reload activated. And here is our application. And what I want to do now is I want to go to the network tab, and we can use the address bar to make the call. So let's test this with API and then products, hit return. And there are our products, and here we can also see them. Make sure that you have no filter active, and here we see them a bit better, a bit more organized. So this is the preview of all our products, and to really prove that these are the ones from the controller, let's add a 1 here, save this, and now reload. And I was hoping that this changes now, product controller. Okay, what about restarting the application? Now it worked. All right, that's interesting. Let's try this again. Restart again. Okay. Maybe this did not work because we have this API route here, but it would have worked if we have opened the application. Anyways, this already worked. And now to test this with our client app, let's make the get call, well, in the product list component. So let's go back to the product list component here, and we can actually remove all our products here like that. Maybe still initialize this as a new empty list of products. And now the interesting stuff is that we have to make an HTTP call, and for that we need an HTTP client, and to get the HTTP client we have to inject this thing. So we're already using dependency injection here, and to do that we use this inject directive, and we inject the HTTP client and call it HTTP. Again, you can always, at least at the beginning, compare this to the default application. Here it's exactly the same. We have injected the HTTP client here, and down here then we are using this method. So let's do something similar now by ourselves. So what we can do is, again, we inject the HTTP client, and then what we can do is on initializing this component. So when this component has been started, rendered, you know what I mean, we can make the call. And what we're going to use here is the method onInitializedAsync. Again, let's compare this real quick. It's also used here. Now, this is one of 3 lifecycle methods in Blazor WebAssembly. We've got onInitializedAsync. The other ones would be onParametersSet and onAfterRender. Now, we will use them later, just so you know. OnInitializedAsync is the very first one, so it's really on initialization of the component. Then we've got onParametersSet, which is the second lifecycle method. This means when we set any parameters, for instance, from the route, we can add the parameters to the pages, to the page directive, so to the URL, to the route. That's the term I was looking for. Then this parameter is set, and this method can react to that. And then the last one is onAfterRender. So when everything has been finished rendering, then we can do something there. So long story short, let's create our methods. Protected overrides. And then now you see them here, onAfterRender. Again, method invoked after each time the component has been rendered. Important here is this Boolean flag first render. So after, you can check for this flag if it's just the first rendering, then we do something, or we do something after every single time the component renders. OnInitialized, you know this already now. And now here, method invoked when the component has received parameters from its parents in the render tree and the incoming values have been assigned to properties. Although the parent stuff is, well, it doesn't have to be the parent. Again, it can also be, so not the parent component, it can also be the route, and that's also a parameter then. All right, so anyways, what we want to use here is the onInitializedAsync, and they fixed the formatting really like this. Before in .NET 5, formatting was kind of destroyed when we used the suggestion here. And now we say our products that we have initialized as an empty list are await in our HTTP, which is our injected HTTP client here, and then get from JSON async, because it's actually a JSON object that we want to use here. And then we define a type, so list products, and something is going on here with Visual Studio. Okay. And then, okay, maybe I have to restart Visual Studio 2022. Well, this works just great. And then we add the routes. So we got the list of products as type, and then we say API products, add the semicolon here, and this should be it. Then, of course, there is a possible null reference assignment, also something new here. So what we can do now is say first the result is this thing, and if the result is not null, then we say products is the result, and we get no warning. I will save this now, and I think I have to restart Visual Studio because of these errors, because I think they seem to come back again and again. But let's test that real quick. I saved this. I don't know if the rebuild did work this time in the hot reload. Let's see, when I refresh the application, we should actually see the call, but we don't see it. See, something is fishy now. Okay, I'm restarting Visual Studio, and then we'll try this again. All right, we are back. So now let's start the app again. There it is. We open the console and let's reload it again. And now we see the call. This is the actual call. Filtered this for the HTTP requests. product, and here we get them back. And now let's test that. Well, we got no other mock products than the except these here, so it really should be these. But hot reloading does not make the call again, so we have to reload the page. Well, that's fine, I guess, but it does not recognize the change. That's really interesting. So we really have to restart it. Good to know. And there we are. All right. So this is lots of stuff we have to do just for making the get call. Well, actually it's not a lot, but we had to explain a lot. But now you made your very first get call in the Blazor WebAssembly client with your web API. And now the next thing, as I already told you, what I want to do is add the SwaggerUI, so we have an automatically generated API documentation. All right, now to install or to use Swagger, we have to add a new get package. And to install this, we right-click the server project here and go to Manage New Get Packages. Then we go to the Browse tab, and in here we will look for the very interesting name Swashbuckle. There it is already. And then we choose this one, ASP.NET Core. You see it got a bunch of downloads here. So let's just install this, and it says it here, Swagger tools for documenting APIs built on ASP.NET, exactly what we want and what we do. So it's now installed, and after that we have to configure this thing a little bit. So we go to the program CS file, and now first what we have to add here in the program CS is builder services add endpoints API Explorer, and this configures an API Explorer using endpoint metadata. So this is the very first thing we have to add here. And then the next thing is builder services and then add Swagger Gen. And after that, after we build the app, we say app use Swagger UI. And then the very last thing, and then we got the middleware working, is app use Swagger. Okay, and this is everything we have to do. We saved this now, and now we can already go back to our application and should be able to access the API, but I think we have to restart it to make this work. So let's restart the application here. This was actually an advantage when using .NET Watch Run in .NET 5, because in this case the app was always rebuilding actually, and it took a bit longer, but we did not have to make any manual change here. But anyways, we restarted the application, and now we can go to Swagger and then the index HTML, and there you have it. We've got the weather forecast and we've got our product call. You see the weather forecast type here, but what you don't see is the product type and the list of products. And for instance, if you have a look here, you see an example value for the weather forecast, but not an example value for the product. Now, why is that? Well, this is the return type of the controller method, the iActionResult. So when we go back to our controller here, this is what I mean. When we now say, instead of iActionResult, we really define it with ActionResult and then list product and another angle bracket here. Well, now it tells us that we have to update the application or restart the application. That's totally fine. That's great. And now when we go back, already restarted the app. This is great now. Then we see the schema, meaning the model. So this is our product model with the ID, which is an integer, the title, string, and so on. And now here we also see an example value, and what we can already do is we can say try this out. We say execute, and we get our products. Isn't that great? So we don't have to use the address bar now in Chrome. Whenever we add a new controller method, we can just test it here. And this, of course, also works with post calls, put calls, and so on. Also delete calls, any kind of call you want to make. Of course, you can test this thing here. So also add a request body and so on. All right, now with that out of the way, we want to build our walking skeleton. So we've got the client part, we got the server part, and now we want to create our database and entity framework and so on. So let's install SQL Server now, because we want to use SQL Server Express for this application. All right, now to get SQL Server or SQL Server Express, again, what you can do is, of course, simply Google for it. So SQL Server Express is maybe the correct search term here. And then just go to the first hit and you get to this page here. Try SQL Server on premises or in the cloud. And what we want to use is SQL Server Express. It is a free edition of SQL Server. That's important. So really free for everyone. Just click download now and you're good to go. Of course, open it, install it, and so on. And while installing this thing, you will already see a connection string. If you want, you can copy this thing, or you just wait for the lecture, the very next one, and there we will add the connection string as well. And what you can also do is, again, at the end of the installation of SQL Server, you will see a link for the SQL Server Management Studio. So you can either click on that button or again, you Google for it. And again, try the first hit here, and then you will get to the download page of SQL Server Management Studio. I like this thing. It's a great browser for databases, for SQL Server databases. You can also only use Visual Studio. It's totally fine, works great, but I'm a guy who really likes the Management Studio here, or just another IDE for your databases actually. So this is up to you, but I recommend downloading SQL Server Express and then downloading and installing SQL Server Management Studio. Again, please do that now. I'll wait and we'll see us in the next lecture. Now with SQL Server and Entity Framework, we have to configure some stuff, of course. We have to set everything up. So how does our application know where the database is? Well, for that, we will use a connection string, and the connection string is usually stored here in the app settings JSON file. So just go there, and then we add a new section, and there it is already. It is suggested connection strings. So we choose this one. And in here now, of course, you can add as many connection strings as you want, but the default one is usually also called default connection. And then for that, we say server. And if you've installed SQL Server Express on the same machine as this application here, or your Visual Studio IDE, then this would be a localhost / and then SQL Express with the default installation. If you're more like an expert, maybe you have changed something, then I think you know what you're doing. Of course, in this case, the connection string is different, but by default, it is server localhost SQL Express. After that, we can define the name of our database. Well, project is called Blazor e-commerce. So maybe also call this thing Blazor e-commerce. And the last thing we want to use is trusted connection true. And that's it. This is our connection string. So server, localhost SQL Express, database, Blazor e-commerce, and trusted connection. Set this to true, save it, and we've got that out of our way. And the next step now is to install Entity Framework. Now to install Entity Framework, I'm using the CLI. Of course, you can use the command line interface or the PowerShell or the package manager console here. And I'm using this thing. And what I want to do now is I want to look if or entity framework is already installed. And to do that, you can simply type .NET EF. Let's have a look. Yep, there was something. Let's see. The Entity Framework Core .NET Command Line Tools 5.0.11 are installed in my case. So maybe it's a good idea to first uninstall them and then reinstall them so I get the latest version. To uninstall this, we just enter .NET tool uninstall and then --global .NET -ef. Already done. This is really fast. And to install it again, it's almost the same. .NET tool and then install and then --global and then .NET -ef. All right, we've got .NET EF version 6.0.0. Isn't that great? Now let's double test that just to be sure. .NET EF, there it is. Entity Framework Core .NET Command Line Tools 6.0.0 are now installed. Perfect. Now this is one of the requirements we need, and in the next lecture we will add our data context and also some more packages to make everything work. All right, now first the packages. We want to use Entity Framework, or to be more exact, it's Entity Framework Core, although they don't use the core term with .NET. Still, it's called Entity Framework Core. And in the server project, we manage our NuGet packages. And here now, this thing is called Microsoft. And then Entity Framework Core. This is the very first one. You can see it here, Entity Framework Core Modern Object Database Mapper for .NET, supports link queries, change tracking, and so on. So exactly what we want here. Please install this package here. Click OK, I accept. Beautiful. Then we need another one. I could show you the errors that occur when we try to add our code first migration, but let's save some time here and simply install the design package, shared design time components for Entity Framework Core tools. So this is necessary for our migrations. Install this one, please. And already the last one is SQL Server. So Microsoft Entity Framework Core SQL Server. This is our SQL Server database provider for Entity Framework Core. We're using SQL Server Express, so this works just fine with the SQL Server database provider. Install this thing, and then we've got everything installed that we need. All right, now let's have a look at the project file. We see Swagger, we see SQL Server, we see Entity Framework Core Design, and Microsoft Entity Framework Core. So everything seems to be installed. This is great. And now we can add the data context. Now with Entity Framework and the data context, we want to access our data from the database. You see lots of data, and that's why I like to create a folder also called data, like that. And then in here, we will create our data context as a new class. So add a class and then call this thing data context. And now the first thing we have to do here is we need our abstract class DbContext. And for that, we need the namespace or the using directive here with the reference, let's say Microsoft Entity Framework Core. And we will need that more often. So maybe again, we can add this to our global usings. So let's say global using Microsoft Entity Framework Core. And then we go back and voila, the DbContext is here for us. Now, what is this thing? Well, we can read the beginning here together. A DbContext or database context instance represents a session with the database and can be used to query and save instances of your entities. DbContext is a combination of the unit of work and repository patterns. We will also use the repository pattern quite often in starting in the next section, where we will use services instead of only using the controllers, because when we would do that, we would create fat controllers, so-called fat controllers. We don't want to do that. Otherwise, people will tell me, hey, this is not the right way to do. You're wrong. Okay, I know. So we will create services with the repository pattern. But as you can see here, the DbContext is simply there for us to query our data from the database. And that's why we need this. And we can call it however we want to call it. But the typical way to call this thing is DataContext. So we've got this thing. But additionally, we have to add a constructor now. We can use this snippet here, enter CDOR, tab twice, and the DataContext now gets an argument, and this one is called DbContext options with the type DataContext, and we call this thing options, and this thing should also use the base constructor here, already suggested by IntelliCode. Nice. This is now our constructor. And now the last thing we have to add is a DbSet, which is a property like that of type DbSet with the product type. And let's see what it tells us here. A DbSet can be used to query and save instances of, in our case now, product, because we already defined it. We can use link queries against a DbSet, and they will be translated into queries against the database. So actually, with our link queries, we will create SQL or SQL statements, and this is why we will add the DbSet here for products, and we call this property then products. Usually you just pluralize the name of the model, and this thing here will then result in a database table of products. So whenever you want to see your entities or your models in the database, then you have to add a DbSet. There are some exceptions, of course, as always. When you're using relationships, maybe, then you do not have to do this all the time. But to be sure, and when you say, hey, I've got this model here, my product, and later, for instance, we will create categories, users, and so on, and you want to see them in a table in your database, then this is the place where you have to add them. So just add a new DbSet of your type and then give this a name. And again, usually you just pluralize your model. So this is then our products table actually. And this is everything we have to do regarding the data context. We save this and then the application is rebuilding. That's fine for now. And next up, we register this data context now and configure this thing for the SQL Server. Now to do that, we go to the program CS. And now this is exciting because before with .NET 5, we had the startup CS file where we had to, well, configure all our things. But now we do this in the program CS with .NET 6. Now we have to use the builder object here to do that. And maybe let's do this at the beginning here. So we say builder services. And then we can say add DbContext with the type DataContext. And this is now not known here, so we can add the using directive. And after that, this thing also gets options. So let's call this thing options. And this is how we configure this for SQL Server. So options, and then we say options was already here, nice, SQL Server. But what we do here now is, again, we need the builder to access the configuration. This is actually how we get information from our app settings JSON file. and then we say get connection string, and then the name of the connection string, which is default connection, like that. We close this here and here, format this thing, and we're done. So builder services, add DbContext, and then options, use SQL Server with builder configuration, collection of configuration providers, and so on. Get connection string, default connection. So this is now everything we have to do. We have to prepare to make use of Entity Framework and SQL Server. And now it's finally time to add our very first migration. So there are actually two ways to use migrations with Entity Framework. We've got the code first migration and the database first migration. Now with the code first migration, again, the name already says it, you write your code first, like your models, the product model, for instance, and then when you add a migration and update the database, Entity Framework will create the tables for you in the database that will work with your models. The other way is simply the other way around. You create your database first, your tables, your relationships, and so on, and then Entity Framework will create the models for that. Now, I think code first migration is used more often, and in my opinion, it's also way more fun. So I don't have to bother a lot with the database, although it's also fun to have a look at the database, change stuff, and so on. But still, that way we can keep coding and we stay in Visual Studio. So let's just use the code first migration here. Now to add a migration, we can use the package manager console again, but first we have to stop the application here, and we can do that by pressing Ctrl+C several times or simply closing the window. And now let's go to the package manager console again. And first, let's have a look at the .NET EF command here. As you can see, we've got 3 commands available: the database, commands to manage the database, DbContext, and migrations, which provides commands to manage the migrations. So it's not much. And of course, maybe you guessed it, to add a migration, we need the migrations command. So let's clear this, and then we say .NET EF migrations, and then add. And since this is our initial migration, we can also call this initial, or maybe something like create initial, and then hit return. And then it's building. Build succeeded. Great. Now we get a warning here because of our price property, and that's simply because when we use the decimal type here, we need to define the digits that are used. So what we can do now, and it's good to see that now we got a new folder here, the migrations, with the migration file. But if something like that went wrong, for instance, we can always remove the last migration. So for instance, we can say .NET EF migrations remove. All right, you see no migrations folder anymore. And then let's add, or let's define the digits here for the model. And to do that, we say column, and then type a name. Let's add another package here, or another reference, system component model data annotations schema. And after that, we say type name, and then decimal, and then we will simply use the default digits. So after the comma, we've got 2 digits, and then we should be good to go. And now let's try another migration again. So .NET EF migrations remove, not remove. Also, let's get some space here and then say add create initial. And now let's see. Build succeeded. This info is fine for us. This thing is done. And now let's have a look at the migration file. We've got the folder here. This is not really interesting for us. This is Entity Framework stuff. And now here we can see this is our actual migration file, and we can see an up method and a down method. And now the up method is called when we update the database, and when we roll back, the down method is called actually. And now here we can see it will create the table products. Then it will automatically use the ID field here as identity field, meaning that it will also increment the ID by itself automatically. And then we got the title field, description, image, image URL, and the price. Again, you can see the decimal type here. And then again here, the primary key ID. So that's great. And now I would say we update the database, or when the database is not there, it will also create it. And we do that with .NET ef database and then update. Keep in mind, also when there is no database, we use the command update. Let's go. Okay, nice. This is done. We also see some stuff that was happening here. For instance, you see the call create database, and here create table, and so on. This is the table EF migrations history. So this is EF core internal stuff. But where is it? Here's our product table actually. So this was called. Great. This is done. And now let's have a look at the SQL Server Management Studio. There it is. We simply connect to our SQL Server. We open the databases, and here it is already. We can open this and then have a look at the tables. There is our products table. Let's make this a bit bigger. We see the columns. We see the keys and the constraints, triggers, indexes, statistics. But I think most important stuff for us here are the columns and maybe also the keys. And now we can right click the products table and say edit 200, top 200 rows. And we see nothing, of course, because we do not have entered any products yet. But this is exactly what we're going to do next. In the next lecture, we seed new data automatically. Now, what we could do here is, of course, enter our products manually, but we don't want to do that. At least I don't want to do it. I'm a lazy coder. So what I want to do is I want to seed the data. And for that, again, we can move our products one step further. We moved them from the client to the web API controller, and now we will use them in the data context, because here we want to seed our data. And to be able to seed data, we use another method. And in this case, this is the method on model creating that we will override in a sense. So let's enter protected, override, void, and then on model creating. We need the model builder here. Let's call this also model builder. And now in here, to seed data for a specific table or for a specific entity, we enter model builder. And now we see already the right suggestion, entity product, because we want to do something with our product entity. And what we want to do is we want to give it some data, and we do that with has data. And now in here, we can again add our product list. So from our product controller, let's get these products here, copy them, and now here we just paste them. Formatting does still not work. That's a shame. So maybe we have to format this by ourselves. So no, not working. Okay, I think that's correct. So these are the products now that we initially have then in the database. So let's save this and then add another migration. Let's clear the screen, and then we say .NET EF migrations add, and then maybe we can call this product seeding. All right, let's have a quick look again. We've got another migrations file. And in here now, in the up method, we see that some data is inserted. Great. And in the down method, the data has been or would be deleted. So let's update our database with .NET EF database update. Nice. We see what's happening here, all these insert statements. And then let's have a look at our SQL Server Management Studio. We can simply right click here and say execute SQL, and there are our products. Great. We do not have to add anything manually. This is now the data in our products table. All right. And now it's time to finish up our walking skeleton by now receiving our products from the database. Now to get the data from the database, we have to go back to our product controller. And now in here, we can actually remove this product list. We don't need our mock products here. We've got real data now in the database. And of course, this method is telling us, hey, there are no products. What the heck are you doing here? Well, yeah, that's true, but we'll fix that right now. The very first thing we need, again, is a constructor here in our controller. And now we want to use dependency injection again. We want to inject the data context. And now to do that, we enter the type, DataContext. Again, something actually for a global using. Really like this, so let's do that real quick. We've already got it in our program CS. There it is. So let's just add the global keyword, save it, go back, and there it is. Isn't that great? And now we've got, for instance, the name context suggested here. So let's use this one. And now the interesting thing is we have to create and assign the field context. But what Visual Studio is doing here now, this is a private read-only field. We've got the this keyword, and I really don't like this. Usually I and a lot of other developers, I think, use the underscore here. But if you do not want to do this manually, we can also configure Visual Studio to do it like that without the this keyword. So let's first remove this. And now to configure Visual Studio, we go to Tools and then Options, then the text editor, there it is. Let's open this. Then we go to C#, then Code Style, and then Naming. And in here now, what we can do is we can specify new naming styles. So we go to Manage and Naming Styles. We add a new one, and in here now, well, first we can name it, probably something like that, underscore, and then field name. And the required prefix, this is the only thing we have to enter here, is the underscore, and we change that to camel case name. And we've got our new naming style. And after that, we have to add this naming style here. And what we want to do is we want to use private or internal fields. And then we use the field name here as a suggestion, like that. And that's everything. Again, manage naming styles, add the field name. You can always edit it afterwards. Add this thing here, and then add a new entry here, private or internal fields, and then use this new field name thing for suggestions. And now hit OK. And now when I do this again with control and then period, or you use the light bulb, now we see create and assign field context, and there is the underscore. So this is just a side note. I like to do it that way. Maybe it helps you as well. And now we've got our data context. And now to get the products from our data context, well, we have to access it, of course, and we do that with var products. Await, you see, now we've got an asynchronous call, underscore context, and now we can simply access our products table with products, and then we turn this into a list, like that. And then in the end, we return OK products. Great, that's it. And now let's start our application again and have a look. Here we are, we make our product call. Of course, there's nothing different now, but when we go back to our database and make our creative test again and simply add the 1 here, hit return. Now we reload the application again, it's making the call, and here we see the change. Isn't that great? So this already worked. We've got our walking skeleton, and now the very last thing I want to do is, well, create a GitHub repository so you can see the code, of course, and also store your own code if you want to GitHub. So let's do that next. Now, to create our repository, our Git repository, maybe also using GitHub, we go to add to source control. Pretty simple. We use Git. And then if you're already logged in to GitHub, then Visual Studio knows this and it will choose your account for the owner. You see the repository name of the repository on GitHub. I think this is fine because the project is also called Blazor e-commerce. We've got the local path here. For now, I'd set this to private because I'm still recording. But of course, when I'm done recording with the complete online course, I will set this to public so that you will have access and, for instance, can copy and paste all the products and the variants and the categories for the seeding, so you really don't have to type this in manually. And this then will be the URL. So maybe you write this down, github.com/Blazor e-commerce, and I would say let's create and push this thing. All right, and when this is done, you see our master branch here, you see the GitHub repo, and now we can track our changes and then commit our stuff, publish it, and so on. And let's have a look at the history here. Now we see the local history, add git ignore and git attributes and add project files. Well, with that, we added some more than just the first project files. We've got our model and so on. But I think this is a good moment now in this course or in creating this application. We've got our walking skeleton. So now we've got also our GitHub repository. And I'd say let's sum up what we did. Congratulations, you got your walking skeleton now, meaning we've got the Blazor WebAssembly client, this thing here, with already a new component, which is the product list that will display our products. And then we've got our server project with a web API and already a product controller that you have created. And this product controller is accessing the DataContext or the database, our SQL Server Express database with the products table. You used code first migrations to, well, create the database, create the product table, and also already seed the data. As you can see here in the DataContext file, we created the product model, of course. So lots of stuff was happening here, and this is the absolute foundation for our application here now. So we've got the client again. I know I'm repeating this, but this is very important. We've got the client, we call the server, and the server gets the data from the database and returns it all the way back to the client. Great, so this works. We pushed it to GitHub, and the next thing now, in the next section, we will add and use best practices, because what I already mentioned is, you see it here, and you also see it here in the default example, that this controller has a bit more logic into it. For instance, it returns or it creates random data. Now, this product controller here only accesses the context, but even this should not happen actually. The product controller should call a product service, which is then accessing the data context and then returning the data. So the controller should only really forward the request from the client to the service, to the product service that we will create in the next section, and then the service is returning the data. We will also add a new class so-called service response that we can use with generics so that we can return more data. So bit stuff is happening in the next section, and we will call this best practices. So I hope you're still with me. Enjoy the next section now. All right, welcome to the best practices section. Now, if you skipped the summary of the last section or you did not pay attention, let me repeat this one more time. If you paid attention, then you can skip to the next lecture. But I really want to emphasize here that there are some practices we should use in our application. One thing is the controller. We don't want to use so-called fat controllers. We want to use thin controllers that are, well, in essence, kind of stupid. They just want to receive the request from the client and then call a service that is doing the whole logic, the whole magic, and then returning this data to the controller and so on. So this is one thing we want to do. And the other thing is we can use a specific class to return the data. And this is what we will do in the next lecture. We will not return the list of products directly. We create a service response that will also have two more properties that will tell the client what is actually going on. What was the call successful, for instance? Of course, there are return types. We're using OK here in this case, and we can use bad request for not found and so on to tell the client that something is happening. But what about a message, for instance? We could do that as well with returning a 404 directly and add a message here. But maybe there are other situations where we just need a bit more flexibility, and this is where this service response comes in. So service response and services, this is what we will do here in this section. And the very first thing now is implementing a service response with generics. All right, now to add the service response or to implement it, we add a new class in our shared project here. So right click, add, and then class, and we call this thing service response. Now this is a public class, and we also add the generic type here because we want to use generics. And this is also the very first property here of type T. Let's make this nullable, and we call this data. Then the next thing already is a flag here, success, and by default we set this to true. And the last thing now is a string, the message, which is an empty string by default. So we've got the service response with the data, which will be the list of products now in this example, then the success flag, and then also the message. So with that, now we also want to make a change to the product controller, because instead of the list of the products, we now want to return the wrapper object here. So the service response with a list of products. And for that, we also create a new response here. This is a new service response with a list of products, and we use the object initializer here to simply set the data to our products, and we format this, and then we return this response here, and then we're done. And now with that, we have to change the client as well, because here we still expect a list of products, and this is simply wrong. So let's add the service response object here with a list of products. Maybe we put this in a new line, and in the end we set the products to result data, and also add a null check here so the warning disappears like that. And then we get an error, but this is funny because I get this from time to time with Visual Studio 2022 and .NET 6. It's telling us, you can read it, following error occurred. This might have corrupted the running process. I don't see the error actually. So I can go to edit, or I can keep editing, or I say I stop the application. Let's keep editing. I saved everything already, and let's go to our application here. We see, in fact, we see an error. And when we go up here, we see something is wrong, unhandled exception. Okay, hard reloads. Last time I did this, I got a JSON serialization error. Now, what happens if you just restart the application? All of a sudden, we get no error anymore. So, and when we have a look at the network tab, we see the correct call, and we also see our wrapper object now. The service response, instead of the 3 books directly, we first have the data property with the 3 books, and then the message and the success. So when you get this strange pop-up that an error occurred and the hot reloading does not work, then please consider restarting the application. It might be the case that actually everything went fine, and well, you just have to restart your application. Maybe do it again just to be sure. Yeah, it loads. We've got our call, and the console does not report any error. Okay, so this is the service response, and in the next lecture we add a product service. So now we will move the logic from the product controller in the server project to a product service. Again, we do that instead of using fed controllers, and we use dependency injection to do that. We did this already with the DataContext, for instance, and now we will do that with our own classes, our own services, and we also have to register them in now with .NET 6, the program CS, but let's do that one step after another. First thing I want to do is add a new folder for all our upcoming services. So let's call this services, and then we add another folder that we call product service. And this is something we will do a lot. We will create a folder, and then in here we will first add an interface. We call this iProduct service. Public interface iProduct service, and then we will add the implementation class, which is called product service in this case, and this thing implements the iProduct service already suggested by IntelliCode. Here we save this, and then we can already register this thing. So in the program CS, let's add it down here, maybe builder services, and then add scoped, adds a scoped service of the type specified in service type to the specified iService collection. There's also add transient service, and also add singleton for a singleton. But what we want to use is add scoped with iProduct service, and then we tell our application with that registration here, as soon as a controller or a class, anything, wants to inject the iProduct service, we want to use the product service class for the implementation. And now, of course, we have to add another using directive. And since we will use the product service more often, again, let's add a global using here. Now, with that, we can again use dependency injection. The great thing is now, as soon as we inject the product service, we will get the product service implementations. Now, with dependency injection, what we can do is maybe we want to change something or test something, whatever. Instead of changing the code in the product service directly, we can create another implementation class, for instance, a product service 2, and then we don't have to change the logic in the controllers or wherever we inject the iProduct service. We just want to test this new product service implementation class. We can do something like that. So meaning, as soon as the iProduct service is injected, please use this class then as implementation, and then we get the new logic the other code that we just wanted to test, or we got, I don't know, just another version, and then we can use this class instead of the old one. So this is one advantage of dependency injection. Of course, it's also there for unit testing. It makes it a lot easier. It's just great. So I hope this helps and you understand why we're doing this. And now in here, we want to, of course, inject the iProductService instead of the DataContext, because the ProductService will now do exactly that, injecting the DataContext. And then the next step would be to inject the ProductService in the product controller. But first, of course, the interface. This is the way we do this. First, we define a new method, and here now it returns a task with a service response. And then I like the suggestions really, but here now it's a list of products. And this method is called getProductsAsync. It's a good name. Why not use it? And with that, then we implement our interface here automatically. So this is how we get our new method at the async keyword here, and then also at the constructor. So again, CDOR, and here now we inject the data context, and we add our private field. And now in here we say response is a new service response with a list of products. That's correct. And the data now, let's do it in one line, is await context products to list async. And in the end, we return the response. All right, and now regarding the controller, we do not inject the data context anymore. Again, instead, we now inject the iProductService, call this ProductService, and define this field now, and we can remove the context. All right. And now what we do, we simply call our new service and set this to the result object here. So result is await ProductService get products async, and in the end we return the results. And we get some build errors. Let's see. Well, this should be easy. Let's save this again. Everything is saved. And does our application still work? Let's reload this. Yep, seems so. Okay, let's go over this real quick again. We added our ProductService folder. We add an interface where we define our methods. This is important because only with that way the product controller can use these methods, of course. And now in the ProductService implementation class, we now inject the data context, same what we did in the product controller earlier. And then we simply implement the getProductsAsync method. And then the product controller is now pretty thin and stupid, but let's not call it stupid really. It's great what it does. So we have this method here. You know what? Let's give this another name, getProducts. This name is better. And yeah, we've got our constructor still, but instead of the data context, we now inject the iProductService. And here we only access the product service and in essence pass the request through to the service, get the result, and then return the result. This is everything the controller should do, really just passing through the requests, and that's it. All right, let's save this again, and I think it's already done. Sometimes it's so freaking fast, and sometimes we see so strange errors. All right, so this is in essence already the product service on the server project, and now we do something very similar on the client. So on the client, we also add a product service, and in essence, we also add first our folder, add new folder services, and then also product service. Like that. And again, we create an interface and also an implementation class. So right click, add new item. It's an interface, product service. There it is. And then the implementation class, product service, and this one implements the product service interface. And now in here, we define not only the methods, but also the products list itself, because now we will store the products in the service, and the product list components, as well as probably other components, access the products from the service. You see what we do here? We store the products in the service, so we don't have to make calls in other components. It's a better architecture in essence, where several components only access the services and the products are stored only on one place, and not every single component has to get the product itself. So let's do it that way. We got our list of products and we call this products. And then, well, this is a property, so let's add our getter and setter. And then we say task get products for our method. And we don't want to do this in our implementation class, of course. We want to do that in the interface. So here we are. We don't know the products type here, so this does not work for our code files. So, but what we can do is again use global using directives. So let's add it here, global using Blazor e-commerce shared. Save this, and then when we go back here, we get our product. Yeah, of course, it does not implement all this stuff, but we do this next. So again, when this was too fast, we added the global using here. I saved everything. That's why we got the error, because we already defined the products property here and the method, but we did not implement it here. So let's do that next. We implement this automatically when it lets us. All right. Okay, we remove the exception. Like that. By default, we set this to a new list of products. And now regarding our method here, get products, we want to make our HTTP call. So similar to the product list component, we want to use something like that. But we first have to inject the HTTP client. So you see it's pretty similar now. Again, we need a constructor here. And now we inject the HTTP client here as well. Let's call it HTTP like that. We add the private field. And now in here, we say our result is await HTTP get from JSON with a service response. Here's another using directive we can actually add globally. So let's do that real quick, because we will use this really often. All right. Actually, it should work now. Save this maybe. Okay. Service response and then list of products. And again, the string here is API and then products. Again, let's put this in a new line. Okay. And now instead of returning something, we say our products here are now result data. And of course, this could be null. So let's just copy the null check real quick. There it is. And add the semicolon. Okay, and now to be able to use this thing, we also have to register it. Again, pretty similar to the server project. We say builder services add scoped, and then product service, and again we add the using directive here, and let's make this global. All right. And with that, now we registered this thing. And next, we have to use it in the product list component to make everything complete. So let's do that now. Now, before we make the change here and inject the product service, the client product service, we add a new using directive here so that we make the product service globally available for every component. And we do that with add using Blazor e-commerce client services product service. This is now the using directive for our product service, and every component now knows this. And here, instead of injecting the HTTP client, we now inject the product service. So that'll be product service, we call this product service, and then down here we only call await product service get products. Okay, got some errors here. Let's just close this. And there's one more thing I'd like to do, because it could be the case that the products are null or the list is empty. And in this case, let's show the user a little message like loading products, for instance. We don't know what this is, but let's just continue with our implementations. If now the product service products are null, or the product service products count is 0, and then in this case we show something like loading products, and if everything is okay, we've got our products, then we display our unordered list. Now one more thing is missing. Do you know what? Yep, the products here. We cannot access these products, of course. We want to use our product service products now, and then we can remove these products. So the code block now is pretty small, and the products are stored in the product service. Again, let's close this, but I have a feeling that I have to restart Visual Studio. But let's see. Let's reload this thing again. And you can see we are making the product call. We got our products. And in essence, nothing has changed for the user. But under the hood, a lot has been changed. Everything still works. So let's sum up real quick what we did in this section. Congrats, now we've got best practices. Maybe it was a bit complicated, maybe a bit confusing, but let's go over it real quick. We started with our shared project. In essence, we created this service response class with these 3 properties: data, success, and message. The data will be, well, the data with a generic type, and then also we use the success message here to tell the client if everything went well or not. And we can also add a message that can display something to the user, for instance. And with that, then we added a product service to the server project first. Here's the interface, and then also the product service. Short note on that, this is an asynchronous method, and IntelliCode suggested to use the async term here. This is, as many things, totally up to you. I don't use this usually because all my methods or my web API methods are, well, mostly they are asynchronous anyway, so it's not really necessary to use this name like that. On the client, we also did not use it. Play around with that. I'd say test it with IntelliCode, so please bear with me if this is not consistent now in this course. That's the reason why, just because Visual Studio 2022 and IntelliCode does some magic here. So we've got our interface, and then we implemented the interface here. Now the product service injects the data context, and then we have to register this thing here, and we do this with builder services add scoped, and then the iProduct service and the product service. As you can see, by the way, I really have to restart Visual Studio. So if you have these issues with Visual Studio 2022 as well, please tell me that. Would be really interesting to know. So we registered the service, and then with the product controller, we're able to inject the product service. And now this logic here, well, there's not much logic. You're just passing through the requests. Great. And then in essence, we did something similar here. Now we've got on the client also a product service, the interface, and the implementation class. But now here in the implementation class, we also have the product or the products property, which is then accessed by the product list. So we do not store the products here in the component itself. We access the products from the product service directly. Okay, and now one more test. This works, and to show you the message, we can activate the throttling actually. Maybe we see, yeah, we see it here really short, for a really short time. But when we add fast3G here, or activate fast3G, reload this again, then we see loading products. Nice. So in this case, the product list count was 0. We see this little message here, good information for the user, and then the products are loading. Great. So this was the best practices section, and next up we will do lots of stuff with our products. So let's go. All right, welcome to this new section where everything is about, or all is about, the products. Blazor WebAssembly in action here. We'll see a lot of Blazor WebAssembly action here. We will add product details, so meaning we see the list here of products, but we want to click them, of course. Now nothing is happening, but when we're done with that, we are able to see the product details. Apart from that, we will also add some categories, add them to the menu here, and then add some variants. So when we have a look at the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, for instance, maybe we do not buy the paperback or the hardcover or whatever. We also want to buy an ebook maybe, or an audiobook, whatever. So then we will add product variants with product types that will enable the user to do exactly that, get the product in another way or in another type. While doing that, we will use select boxes, for instance, so other HTML components. The same with the search. So here in the top bar, we will add a product search with an input text field and also a data list. So a search that will suggest some words, some terms the user wants to enter, and also it will suggest final products in essence. We will add featured products, we will add pagination, we will use another layout then, so the sidebar will be removed and we will only see top menus here. And then of course when we access the products here, we want to buy them, so we will implement a cart where the user can put the products he or she wants to buy. We will be able to change the quantity, update them, and so on. So lots of stuff we will do here, but what we will not do is authentication. This is then done in the next section, and with authentication we will then store everything the user wants to buy, for instance, in the database. But for now, lots of stuff will be changed here in the client application. All right, and the first thing we want to do is finally showing the details of a product. So we've got here our product list component, which is a shared component, but the product details now will be a new page, but still in essence a Razor component. So right click the pages folder here, go to add, and then Razor component. And we call this now product details. There it is. And of course we want to rebuild and apply the changes. And since this is a new page, we also add the page directive here, and the URL now will be product, and then we already use a page parameter, and we add this parameter in curly braces, and we can also use a constraint here, meaning we want this ID of a product to be an integer. Now, what I can also do here and say we will need the iProductService to get the product details. So let's already inject it with add inject iProductService. We call this product service. The title can here be removed for now. And then let's go to the code block first. Very first thing I want to add here is the current product, because we want to access the product in a minute in the HTML, and by default or in the beginning this thing is a null. And then we've got our integer parameter, the ID, and since this is a parameter, we also use the parameter attribute here, and then we say public int ID. It is a property, so I could have used the built-in snippet here. And after that, we will use now another lifecycle method. You still know this, right? And this time it is not on initialized async, it is on parameters set async, because we want to set the parameter the ID. So protected, override, async task. Oh, there it was already on parameters set async. And what we will do here for now, we will not make a web service call here. We just say product is product service products find, and then we want to get the product. We do this with a little lambda expression here, where the ID of the product equals the given ID. Now, when we do it that way, and fix this little typo here. Now, when we do it like that, I have to mention that this only works when we load the products before we access the product details. Because of course, when we go to the index page, we will load the products here, and we've got them, the list of our products, and only then we can actually find them. So when we first go to the index page and then access the details, it'll work. But if we reload the page then, or directly access this route here, product, and then the ID, it won't work because the products list is empty. Now let's fix this thing here real quick, and then the warnings are gone. And now let's add some HTML. So first, if our product here is null, we tell the user that we're currently loading the products. And if we got a product, we will display it with some HTML here. Again, let's add some divs and stuff, and also some CSS classes. So first div with the class immediate, and then again we display the image with immediate image wrapper here, and right margin 2. Then the image class will be media image, and the source here now is of course the image URL of our product. We can also add the text, product title, like that. And after that we add a div with the media body class. And here now we give this title an h2, or we use the h2 tag here for the title. Add product title. And then we add the description, add product description. And in the end, again, the price with also the price class. All right, so now the price class will be the same as the one of the product list. So actually, let's just move it to the global style sheet. Here it is. We remove it here and add it here maybe. Okay. And then, similar to the product list, we have to add another CSS file, and we use CSS Isolation again here. So add a new item in our pages folder. Now again, this is a CSS file, and the name must be correct. So product details razor CSS, there it is. And now again, we can add some classes. So first the media image with a maximum height of 500 pixels this time. Also a maximum width of 500 pixels. We give this a border or radius of 6 pixels. Margin would be 0, then 10 pixels, 10, 10, like that. Then the media image wrapper, maximum width of 500 pixels, maximum height 500 pixels, and the text align should be center. And then already our responsive stuff, max width would be 1023.98 pixels. And in this case, we say the media image gets a max width of 300 pixels, and the media image wrapper gets a width of 100%, and the height then is set to auto. All right. And now the last thing is, well, fixing the URL actually, because in our product list here we have to change the href. So it's not the hash sign anymore. Now it's a proper route products and then at product ID. And we do the same down here. Save that. And then let's test that already. Product application should be rebuilt. Let's try the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. There it is. Something is wrong with the image. So let's have a quick look. Yeah, the ad was missing here. Let's do that. Whoa, this is the great stuff of the hot reloading. This now worked pretty well, very fast. And we got our big image, and the same works, of course, for Ready Player One. The scrolling is done automatically. I really like that. That's really, really nice. Okay, so we've got our product details, and when we reload the application now, as you can see, it says loading product, which is not correct, of course. So we have to fix that next, meaning receiving a single product from the server. So we made our changes to the client with the new product details component, adding some code here. We've got our product variable, our parameter here with the ID. And now it's important to use this ID here to make a call to the server and get the single product from the server so that this route really works when we access it directly. Now, to do that, of course, we have to make a change to our ProductService interface. We add a new method here, and this time it returns a service response with a single product. And we use the suggestion here again, get product async with a product ID, but this thing is an integer. Now let's implement this method already. Right here, we implement the interface automatically. There is our new method. We add the async keyword. And now first, let's define our service response. It is an empty response for now. So new service response product. That's correct. And then we say var product is await context products, and then find async, and then we add the product ID here. Now, if the product is then null, we say response success is false, and we can also add a message like, sorry, but this product does not exist. Something like that. And in the else case, we say response data is the product. And in the end, we return our response. So again, we initialize the service response. We get the product from the database with find async and give this method the product ID. So it is really looking for the entity for the product that has the given ID. If it doesn't find one, then the result is null. And in this case, we set the success flag to false and also give this thing a message like, sorry, but this product does not exist. But if everything went right, we set the data to the actual product and return this with our service response. And now we have to add a new controller method here, which is also a get method, but this time we will add the ID to our method. And to do that, let's copy this here. We return now a list not a list of products, of course, just a service response with one product. And we can also call this method here get a product with still the product ID, like that. And to make use of this parameter here, we have to add a route actually. So in essence, you can do it like that, HTTP get, and then also add the route attribute here. And then this would look like that. So again, a parameter is done in curly braces, but we can combine these two attributes here, HTTP get and the route. So let's remove the route attribute and simply add the parenthesis here, and then also the parameter in curly braces, which is the product ID then. So the name product ID should be the same as this one here. So this is our parameter. And with that, we access our get product async method and give this thing the product ID. And in the end, we just return the result. So that's already it. We did not implement it in the client for now, but we can still test it with either the address bar, of course, or Swagger again. So let's go to maybe Swagger here. We see our method already. We see an example value, and now let's try this and add 1 as an ID, for instance. Hit execute. And there's the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Let's test it one more time. ID 2, Ready Player 1. So this works just fine. And now let's finish this implementation in the client. Now, similar to the server, we have to make changes to the product service on the client, of course. And first, we add another method in the interface. This time, it also returns a task, but also with a service response with a product here, and we call this method get a product maybe. So it's similar to our get a products method, and we add the parameter again. So int product ID. So this is our method. Then in the interface, you get a build error that says, yeah, the product service does not provide this method. Of course, now Visual Studio is faster than my implementations here in this case. So let's implement the interface automatically and already add the async keyword. And now the body of this method looks pretty similar to the get products method. Here we make another HTTP call. So let's start with var result is await, and then HTTP get from JSON async again. That's correct. We want to get a product here, but with a service response as our wrapper object. And now regarding the URL, we use the dollar character here because we want to add a parameter to this string. And the string then is API product, and then again in curly braces product ID, like that. And in the end, again, we return the result. All right, now maybe you're wondering why we really return the service response this time. Well, you will see why in a minute. In the product details now, we will use this method from the product service instead of this find method here. And then we will check for the success flag. And if the success flag is then set to false, we will display a message. And otherwise, we will, well, simply display the product. So the very first thing now we have to add in the code block is a new message variable. So private string message. And then again, we use this new method here. So product service, and then get product with the ID. This is an asynchronous method, so we also use the await keyword here. And we cannot set the product directly, of course. We first have to set a new result here. Now, in the beginning, let's set the message to loading a product. So the stuff we entered up here, and instead of this fixed and hard-coded text now, we display our message. And now we decide how this message should look. So if the result was not successful, then we say the message is a result message. And otherwise, we say, finally, our product is result data. All right. Of course, this message here could be null. So let's set this to string empty like that. And then the warning should disappear. All right. Now it did. We reloaded the application. So let's test that already. We see the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, for instance. We can click on it and we really get it. And here you already see the call. So we really get the data from our database in this case. And now we can also reload the page and it still works. But what happens if we enter an ID that is not there? We get the proper message. Sorry, but this product does not exists. Perfect. So this works just fine. And next we introduce categories. Now, one more thing before we continue with the categories. I had to make this little fix already in the last section. Again, we've got Bootstrap 5 now with .NET 6. So as you can see here again, we've got Bootstrap version 5, and with .NET 5, we got Bootstrap version 4. And in this case, there were some CSS classes available that are not anymore. And here already we fixed this. We added the media class and the media body class. And now actually, since we also want to use these two here in the product details, you can see it here. We've got media and media body. Let's just put them here in the app CSS, because now, let me rebuild it. Wait a sec. When we don't have these classes, save this. It looks like that, but with these classes now, in the product details, don't know why hot reloading is not working here. This is really interesting. But when we reload the app by ourselves or the page here, then we see now this looks just fine. And while we are already at it, as you can see now regarding the responsiveness, this shouldn't really look like that. We also want to put this div at the bottom or below the image. So let's fix this as well real quick. We go back to our first product list actually, because here we see the media class with flex direction column in case we have a resolution below 1024. Now, of course, we could move that to the app CSS as well, or let's do it just real quick. We copy and paste it here into the product details eraser, save it, and now the hot reload already did its magic. Now this looks as it actually should. Okay, so this works now, and now let's continue with the categories. All right, now for our categories, the very first thing we need is the model, of course. So let's add another class to our shared project. There we are, and we call this thing category. Here we are. Let's make this public. Of course, we would have to restart the app to make the changes work, but we have to write some code first. Now, a category is actually pretty small. The first thing we need is again an ID. Then we add a name, which by default is string empty. And after that, we also add a URL, also string empty in this case. Now the URL is there, for instance, if we got a name like video games that has a space in between, then we will use the URL with a dash in it. So video dash games, for instance, and that we can use to then access the actual page and only see products by the specific category. All right, now with that, we've got our category model already, but we want to add a relationship to the product. So a product now always has a category, and to do that, simply we add here our category, call it category like that. And then what we also want to add is actually the category ID. So category ID like that. And we can make this actually nullable. All right, we saved it. And now why the category ID? Well, in essence, this would not be really necessary because Entity Framework would add a field called categories ID then, I think, automatically, and it will, well, work out the relationship by itself. And we developers in the code, we can always include the category to the product so that we can see everything of this category. But if we want to, well, specify the ID name by ourselves, for instance, Entity Framework is calling this thing categories ID, but we want to set this to category ID for whatever reason, then we can do it that way, and Entity Framework will know, okay, this is the foreign key now in this case for the product. And the other thing is, when we want to seed some data, we also need this property so that we can set the category ID for the product. And this is what we will do in the next lecture, meaning next we seed some categories and also add a new migration. So again, for seeding data and adding a new migration, we go to the data context, and for the categories, let's do that manually here. Again, we say model builder entity, and now it's our category entity. And here again, we say has data. And in here now, we say category, new category. And this category gets the ID 1. Then the name should be books in this case. And the URL is, in this case, books with a lowercase b. Let's format this already, and now let's just copy it so that we get 3 categories total for now. Remove the comma here, format this again, okay. And now the next one, of course, ID 2 should be, yeah, movies. Name would be movies. And now here, ID 3. And as I said, I want to add some video games to our application, to our shop. And this then would be the proper URL. And now regarding the products here, well, we've got only 3 products and all of them are books. So now we can set the category ID to 1 for every single one of them, because every single one is a book. And don't forget the comma here, like that. Okay, so we've got our categories, seeded them. We've got our products and added the category ID. And now, you remember it, we want to add our categories to the database. And that's why we add another DB set here of type category. And we call this thing now categories. That's it. Save everything. And now I hope we won't get any errors, because then we can run our migration. So we are in the server directory. Let's have a look. Yep, Blazor e-commerce server. And now we add a new migration with .NET EF migrations, add categories, for instance. Let's see. I think because the app is still running, we have to close it first and try that again. Yep, now it worked. Okay, great. So we've got a new migrations file here. As you can see, we get this new column, category ID, in our products table. We get this new categories table here with ID, name, and URL. We got the primary key ID. We insert some data. And what else we got? That's what I was looking for. We got the foreign key here, meaning that products now have a relationship to, or products and categories have a relationship. So every product now can have one single category, and this is done with the category ID here. Perfect. So this is everything we want. And now let's update the database with .NET EF database update. Lots of stuff is happening, and this was done. And now let's have a look in the SQL Server Management Studio real quick. We connect to our server and we open our Blazor e-commerce database, and there it is. This is our categories table. We got the columns. Yep, and when we have a look, we should see our 3 categories. Great. And now regarding the products, when we have a look here, we see our category ID. Nice. All right, but now we've got more categories than just books. So I would say we add more products to our application. All right, now to seed more products. I really don't want to do this manually now, and I actually don't want you to do this manually. This is tedious work, so we really don't have to do this. So please go to the GitHub repository and just copy and paste a little code this time. I really don't make this often that you have to copy code. Actually, I think this is the very first time in any of my online courses. But please go to Patrick God, that's me, and then just Blazor e-commerce, not prep. It is, in your case, Blazor e-commerce, like that. But as you can see, by recording this, well, the products have not been seeded yet, the other products. So after this lecture, I will commit this and push this, and then you should have this available in the GitHub repository. So please go to Patrick Blazor e-commerce, and then you go to the Blazor e-commerce folder, then server, data, DataContext, and then we go to the history, and I will push this with you together. Yeah, I will also maybe call this commit seeding more products. And then you see it already here. This is the change in the on model creating a method. And in here now, this product here is the ID 3, and here it starts with ID 4 and so on. So let's just copy it from here so that we get some more products. This should be it. ID 11, yep, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Well, let's just try it. Now we go back to our data context. We add a comma here and paste this. And now something is wrong, of course. Let's see. Okay, there's a curly brace missing. Yeah, that's everything that was missing. Let's also format this. So put this here. And now this should work. So we've got our first 3 products. These are the books. Then we've got some movies, The Matrix, Back to the Future, Toy Story, and then games, Half-Life 2, Diablo 2, Day of the Tentacle. And then 2 consoles, the old Xbox and the SNES. That's great. You see the category ID is set here. We've got the price and so on. So this should be it. Now let's add another migration with .NET EF my migrations add and then seed more products. All right, let's have a quick look. There it is. It's just inserting some. Here it is. It's inserting more data. That's nice. So let's update the database with .NET EF database update. All right, quick look at SQL Server Management Studio. We simply reload this SQL here for the products, and there are our products. All right, this works. Now, real quick, let's push this. Got some changes already anyways, and I'd say we call this product details, categories, and seeding more products. Push this. And then, of course, we've got one outgoing, so we can commit this, and now we can push it. There we are. And now let's have a quick look again at the repository. So as I said, we just go to Blazor e-commerce. There it is now. And again, in your case, you can go through the folders here first and then to data and DataContext. And here in the history, you see this commit now. And here are all the products, actually with the new IDs, and here the rest of the products. Okay, so please do that. And now when we start this app and test it real quick, we go to Swagger and the index HTML. We've got our product method here. Let's try it out and execute. And here are all our products from the database. Okay, great. And next we should, I would say, receive the categories from the server. Okay, now to get the categories from our database, well, we have to do something that is pretty similar to our product service here already. We are in the server project, of course, and now in the services folder here, we create a new folder for our category service. So right click, add a new folder, category service, there it is. And now again, we have to create an interface and an implementation class first for our dependency injection. So add a new item. This is an interface. We call this category service, and also the implementation class category service. And this thing implements the category service. All right, now we can already register this thing. So similar to the product service and product service here again, we can just copy this line in the program CS, add it here, a new one with the category service, and implementation class is the category service. And again, similar to the product service, we copy this and use the magic of the global using directive now for our category service. So it is available everywhere for instance, when we create the controller in a minute, then we can make use of this global using directive here. Okay, but first, now the interface of the iCategoryService. Here already we create a method called getCategories, and if IntelliCode again suggests to call it getCategoriesAsync, then we will do that. But first, the return type is a task, returning a service response with a list of categories, calling it get all. Okay, this is interesting. Now I want to call this one get categories. It's not suggesting get categories async this time. I don't know why, but please, let's just stick with it. I mentioned it, so I hope you bear with me and it's not bad. I already don't think it's so bad that the product methods here are called get products async, for instance, and the category methods not. Again, it's up to you. And since we are using asynchronous methods almost all the time in this course, I think we can just ditch the async term at the end and only call this method, for instance, here get categories. And later, maybe when we refactor our code, we can remove the async for these methods here in the product service. Anyways, we've got our get categories method here. And now in here, we want to implement this thing. Let's do that automatically. Here's our get categories method. And the first thing, as always, we add our async keyword. And now let's implement this. The first thing again is a constructor with CTOR, hit tab twice, and then we've got our constructor, and again we inject our data context, call it context, and create and assign the field underscore context so that we get access to our categories. And now in here we get our categories with await context. And this is amazing. Categories async, categories to list async. This is exactly what we want. And now here we return a new service response with a list of categories, of course. And here we now set the data to the categories. Great. And this is how fast you can implement your logic, your code with the new IntelliCode. So although I think Visual Studio 2022 is still a bit buggy, this feature is amazing. All right, and now with that, we can create our controller. So in the controllers folder, we right click, add a new controller. And again, it is an empty API controller. Click add, and we call this one now, you guessed it, category controller. All right, in here now, again, we want to create a constructor and we inject the iCategoryService. Maybe also call it CategoryService. Again, I know I'm repeating this, but we do not need the using directive here. And I just think this is great. And here we create and assign the field. One little comment still, I know that some of you will say, well, it is hard to maintain the code when we use the global using directive. Maybe you're right, maybe not. I don't know. I don't have a lot of experience with that. And well, you know, it's really new, so I cannot really say this. But maybe if you have some more experience in the near future, then please tell me, tell us, tell the community. Maybe write a comment in the Q&A section. And I think I think it would be really interesting to know this. All right, now we've got our constructor here, and now we implement our web service call. First, it's again an HTTP GET method, and then we add public async task, and then action result again, because we want to test this and see the type in Swagger. So we use the action result return type with a service response, and then here a list of categories with a lot of angle brackets, and we call this thing get categories like that. And now in the body we just type IntelliCode is really funny, but it should be var result await category service get categories. That's correct. And then we return OK result. Nice. All right, this is everything. And now let's start the app. I have to start it again. It's another day. So we start it without debugging. And then when the application has been loaded, we go to Swagger and test this real quick. Of course, we could also use the address bar. Up to you what you prefer. But here now is our app. For instance, if you want to use the address bar, just type API and then a category. Here they are. And regarding Swagger, we say Swagger index HTML. We see it already here. This is the call and this is our type. This is great. Also CategoryList service response. This is the thing we get from our controller method. And now up here, this is the actual method. We see the example value. And now let's try this thing. And here are our categories. Perfect. So this works. And now the next step is to add a category service to our client. So back to our Blazor WebAssembly client. And again, we do something really similar. We create a new folder, category service. And of course, in the beginning of creating all these services, we do this a lot. It's kind of, no, it is a repetitive work really, but well, if you want to use better practices, maybe then you have to do it. And afterwards, you will thank me and yourself that you did it, because maintaining and reading all this may be easier than if you would use the components regarding to the Blazor client or only the controllers regarding to the server project. So let's just do this. Let's create the new interface. Again, category service and also the implementation class category service, implementing the category service. And let's again also already register this thing. So in here, we copy this, paste it. We've got our category service, same here. And again, the using directive for the category service. Let's use the service here. All right. And also here in the client, we real quick go to the imports Razor file and also import the category service for our components. All right, and now again, similar to the product service, we've got our products here, and I want to do the same in the category service so that the components will access the categories from the service. So it is a property, meaning we can use our prop built-in snippets, although we remove the access modifier here. So this is a list of categories. We call this categories, and then we add another method, task get categories. Yeah, I think this is correct. Get categories. All right. Again, notice we do not return the categories here. We will set the categories within this method, but of course we will make the HTTP call. So let's implement this here. And again, we implement the interface. We remove the exception. And this thing here, right? We can add the async keyword. And again, we need a constructor which injects the HTTP client. So CTOR, there it is. We inject the HTTP client, call this HTTP, and create the fields. All right, and now in our get categories method, we say our response is await HTTP get from JSON async. This time it's a service response with a list of categories. One more angle bracket. Yep. And the URL now is API category. It doesn't matter if you use uppercase or lowercase, but this should be it. And after that, we set our categories to response data if, of course, they are not null. So let's also add the null check here if response is not null and also the response data is not null. Then we set the categories. And the last thing, let's also initialize the categories here as a new category list. Okay, so we've got that. And the next thing now is, of course, we want to display the categories here and we want to display them in the NavMenu. So let's implement that next. All right, now to display the categories in the NavMenu, of course, we go to the NavMenu Razor component here. And as you can see, the only thing here in the code block is these little variables, the toggle NavMenu method and so on. But now we want to get the categories here. And for that, we use the category service. And to be able to do that, we have to inject the service first. So at the top of the NavMenu Razor component, we add inject I category service. We call this category service. And then now down here, we add another lifecycle method. This would be now the onInitialized method. So protected override async. Make sure to write this properly. And now here on initialized async, that's the one. Again, we have to add the async keyword here. And now we simply call await category service and then get categories and remove this thing here. And I think I have to restart Visual Studio again. And by the way, I had to restart it as well before I started recording this lecture now. But anyways, we've got the category service here. It's injected. We make the call. We can already test this, of course, and have a look at the network tab. Yes, we have to rebuild the application. That's correct. So let's do that. And then in our browser now, we have a look at the network tab. Let's reload this page again. And here we already make this call. Okay, this is nice. This works. And now just ignore these little information thingies here. But let's focus now here on the actual menu. So we've got the home menu button or the link, the counter, and the fetch data. First thing I want to do is remove the icon, save this, and how to reload. Not working now. What if we reload this? Now it's telling me that we got some errors. Okay, you know what? I'm restarting Visual Studio. And then we have a look again. Okay, we are back. I'm not starting the application now. So let's just continue implementing this. All right. And now let's focus on the actual menu. So we've got the home link here. And now I want to simply create a for each which goes through all the categories now with for each var category in our category service and then categories collection. There it is. And in here now we just copy this stuff here or cut it, paste it down here. We remove the fetch data. And now here also I remove the icon. For the href now use add category URL and then here the category name like that. Save everything and now let's start the app again. And I'm really thinking about disabling the hot reload feature. But still, this is now our menu. Isn't that great? Not that much, but it took lots of work with Visual Studio 2022. No, sorry. Still like it, of course. But yeah, sometimes, you know, there are some little bugs. Anyways, we've got the home link, we've got books, movies, and video games. Now, of course, we can go there, but nothing is happening. It says, sorry, there's nothing at this address. Well, where's this coming from? Let's have a look. What about the app raiser? Oh yeah, really. If the URL is not found, then we get this little text here that there is nothing at this address. Okay, so this is nice, but or not so nice. We've got our menu now, but of course we want to get the correct products now, so let's implement that next. All right, now to get our products by category on the server, we have to add another method to the ProductService interface. So again, in our server project, this one here, we go to the ProductService interface, and then maybe we can copy this line here because we also get a list of products. But now we call this method get products by category, and we add an argument string category URL. So get products by a category, returning a list of products with a service response, of course. And the argument is the category URL. And now let's implement that here in our implementation class. And there it is. We add the async keyword. All right. And now here we can already initialize our service response. So this is a new response. Make sure to write this properly. So new service response with a list of products. And we use the object initializer here already, and can set the data to await context products. And then we want to filter these products by the category URL. So what we can do is we can use the where function here, and this where function gets a little lambda expression. So we want to filter the products where, or get the products where the product category and then its URL to lower, so that this thing is case insensitive, equals the given category URL also to lower, just to make sure. And then we turn this into a list async like that. And in the end, we return the response. So again, we use this little filter method here where we then filter the products, where we can then filter the products by any property. And in our case, it's the URL of the category. All right. And now let's just save this. By the way, maybe you've already seen it. I again had to restart Visual Studio. So sometimes I will just restart it and not show you this, because I think this is just not exciting for you and maybe it's getting on your nerves. So if I have any problems with Visual Studio 2022, then might be the case that I restart it, you won't see it, but I then have to restart the application. So if you're wondering, wait a second ago or in the last lecture, the application was running, why does this guy have to restart the app again? Well, maybe there was something going on with Visual Studio, or the hot reload did not really work. Anyways, we've got our function here, and now the last step is the product controller, where we add another get method. So http get, and now the URL is category, and then our category URL as a parameter like that. So the complete route then would be API, then product, and then category, and then the category URL. We'll see this in a second. Let's maybe just copy this thing here, because we get a list of products, and we call this again get products by category, and we add the string here, so string category URL, and finally we just call get products by category with the category URL, and this should be it then. And now let's start the app. All right, there it is. Now the client would still not work, of course, because we haven't changed it yet. But what we can do is we can test this with Swagger. Here's our method. So category URL, let's try it. And for instance, let's add books here, hit execute, and we get our books. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Ready Player One, and 1984. Then we've also got the movies. This works. And also the video games, like that. What about music, for instance? Nothing there. An empty array of products. Okay, this is exactly what we want. And now let's make a change to the client. Okay, now regarding the client, this is a bit different. So first, regarding the ProductService interface here, what we will do is we will not add another method. We will actually change our getProducts method. And in here now, we will say we add a new argument, the category URL. And by default, we will set this to null. So with that, we will then just decide, okay, if we have no category URL given, then we will display all the products or receive all the products from the request, all the products from the server. And otherwise, of course, we will make a call with the given category URL. And another thing we want to add is now actually an event, because the thing is, when we switch the categories, the ProductList component won't call the onInitialized method. So the products won't be refreshed. So we do not really see the change. The component does not know that something has been changed. But to tell the component that something has been changed, we will use an event. And with that event, we will also make use of the lifecycle method onParametersSet. So let's do this now, and you will see what I mean by all that along the way. So first the event action, and then let's call this products changed. So we will invoke this event whenever the products list will change. And to make this warning here go away, let's just turn this into a nullable string, and then there is no warning anymore. Okay, let's save this one. Yeah, there are errors. I know this, and I think that Visual Studio is not happy with all the other implementations now, but let's just keep doing this. We implement the interface. We've got our event here. And now here, the getProducts method. Of course, we did not have to write a new method. We just changed this one. So now we've got our parameter here, or the argument. And what we now do is we will use the ternary operator to check if the category URL is null. So result category URL equals null. And if so, we still use this call here. But if not, so we add the colon here, and then we make the other call. So if not, we make the call to API product, and then category, and then the category URL. And to make this work, we add the $character here. All right, so that's that. And again, in the end, we invoke our event. So product changed invoke. And now with that, every component that subscribed to this event will then know, hey, something has been changed, so let's do something. And what this something is, I will show you now. So we've got the product service covered, And now let's go to our index page actually, because this is where we will use the product list component. So in our index razor component here, there's not much, as you can see, but there now is another option. So we have this route, and now we can also add another route with a parameter, and this would simply be the category URL. Like that. We've got our product list, and now in here we will add the lifecycle method. So we add a code block first. All right. Then we need the category URL, of course, as parameter. So prop. Now this is a string, the category URL, and we add our parameter attribute. And now down here we add the lifecycle method protected, override, async, and then on parameters set async. And I don't know why the async keyword is disappearing all the time, but that's the one now. Here we set this to null, make this nullable, then the warning is gone. And here now we say await product service get. Oh yeah, of course we have to inject the product service first. So good that you told me this. Inject product service, and now product service get products, and then the category URL. Okay, and now one thing is still missing. In this case, we use the onParameter set async method because of our category URL parameter. This is great, but still no component subscribed to the actual event, and this should be done by the product list component. There it is. But first, let's test this. Now, keep in mind, I made the invoke call. So what is happening now? Let's just start the application. And again, when we go to our product service, here you see the invoke call. And let's see if the app is running somewhere. There it is. Now let's see, loading products. We get an error, and this is actually what I expected. There it is. Object reference not set to an instance of an object. Something is wrong here. Product service line 30. Let's have a look. Yeah, this is actually what we did. So we invoke this event, but no component subscribed to this event. And this is crucial actually, because as long as no component is subscribing to this, we get this error. Now when we comment this out and reload the application, the error is actually gone. This is nice. What if I go to books now? Movies, video games, nothing changes, right? So let's go to movies and reload. Nothing is happening. Now what happens when we reload the app? Still, we always get all the products, but when I go to the network tab now, go to the movies for instance, or we see that the movies call was made, but here nothing changes. And now we have to fix that. So again, let's add the invoke here. And now in our product list component, there it is, we have to add something right here. So the first thing is we remove this method. This is why we actually saw all the products now. We don't need this anymore because now our index page is making the call. But what we want to do now is actually we want to subscribe to this event. So product service and then the event products changed. And when this event is raised, we say state has changed. And you can see it here in the tooltip. This thing notifies the component that its state has changed. When applicable, this will cause the component to be re-rendered. So again, this really means when this event products changed is invoked, then this component will re-render itself. This is not asynchronous anymore, so we can use the synchronous onInitialized method. And one more thing is important. We also want to unsubscribe to this event onDispose. For that, we implement a little interface here. So implements iDisposable, and then we add the method public void onDispose. And here now we say ProductService products changed, and then minus equals state has changed. And this is how we unsubscribe to this thing. Now let's save everything. We've got an error. Let's see. ProductList does not implement iDispose. Yeah, it's not called onDispose, it's called dispose. That's correct. Now we have to start the app again. Still an error. Yep, void. Now let's try that. Okay. There we are, and we already see the change. Now everything works as expected. So when we go to home, we do not set a category URL, as you can see here. Also, when we reload the page, we get all our products, and we also see the product call here so that we get all the products. But regarding the books, for instance, we see the books call is done here. This is the URL, category books. We get the books. Same for the movies and for the video games. Okay, but still, since this is, I think, a bit complicated, let's recap what we did here. First, in the ProductService interface, we changed the getProducts method. We added the nullable string category URL and set this to null by default, and we added the event action products changed. After that, regarding the implementation, we say if we get a category URL, then, or we get no category URL, then we make our call we did in the past, API product. But if we get a category URL, then we say API product category with the given category URL. And in the end, we invoke the products changed event, telling every component that subscribed to this event, hey, you have to do something. Then, instead of calling the onInitialized async method in the ProductList component right here, and instead of getting all the products here, now the receiving part is done by the index page. So in here, we have a new routes with the page parameter, category URL. We inject the product service. And now in here, we say when all parameters are set, because it could be that we get a URL, then we make the actual get products call. And the product list now is just reacting to that by subscribing to the products changed event, meaning as soon as the products changed event has been invoked, we change, or we say the state has changed, and this means this component is re-rendering. And this is everything you wanted to do. Okay, so I hope you got this. And now what we want to do is we want to introduce product variants, meaning, for instance, for books, the user don't want to always buy the paperback, for instance. Maybe there's an option to buy an ebook or an audiobook, and this is what we will implement next. Well, what a ride so far, don't you think? If you really made it this far, then I think now is the time to tell you that you've really got what it takes to finish the complete course. So first, thank you so much for staying with me for such a long time. You already did a lot in the last couple of hours. And now, if the whole content resonates with you, I would be really happy if you head down to the video description, check out the link to the course, then you get a discount for the complete course, and of course you can continue with this thing and finish everything. And after that, maybe give me some feedback, some suggestions. Of course, a product like that is never really finished, so of course, as with all my other courses, I will add updates, I will add new lectures when the next .NET version is out there, then I will update the course as well. So yeah, I think now it's the time to enroll in the course. Thank you very, very much. And additionally, if you like my content here on my YouTube channel, I would really appreciate it, of course, if you like and subscribe. Maybe click the bell icon, and I hope I see you next time. Take care.